Chapter 76. The sound of iron hooves clanging against the cold wind could be heard as the horses galloped in the dark night. One could vaguely see the cotton covers tied to the horses' hooves. Ning Chan narrowed his eyes even more. The military advisor of Northern Meng would not make any mistakes. How big was the impact of the cotton covers? In fact, it was not big. To put it simply, it was nothing more than hearing the galloping of horses from 5 kilometers away or 9 kilometers away. However, on the battlefield, a distance of 1 kilometer could result in a completely different outcome. The military advisor of Northern Meng did not make any mistakes in this detail. The general leading the troops was an expert. The closer he was, the harder it was to hide his aura. Ning Chan slowly drew his bow and nocked an arrow. He was about to shoot, but after a while he pulled back his bow. Is the imperial concubine safe and sound? Ning Chan turned around and looked at the woman beside him as he asked softly. Qing Ning nodded. Zhang Xuan's tent was surrounded by experts from the army. As long as it was not an expert like the one who tried to assassinate Marquis Wu, the Empress' safety was guaranteed. Although Marquis Taiping was seriously injured in the assassination a few days ago, the 3 swordsmen were not much better off. They would not be able to attack again in a short period of time. Then I am relieved. Ning Chan turned his wheelchair and walked down from the high ground. He said, Sister Qing Ning, let's go greet the military advisor of Northern Meng. Since he only had the ability to shoot 1 arrow, why not give it to the woman of Northern Meng? Qing Ning was startled, but she did not stop him. With her around, nothing would happen to Ning Chan. After a while, a horse carriage set off from the camp and disappeared into the darkness. The distance of 100 kilometers was not far. If a horse galloped quickly, it would take 2 hours. The horse carriage was not as fast as a horse, but after 3 hours, it arrived in front of the Northern Meng camp. Ning Chan found a place with slightly higher ground, then looked in the direction of the Northern Meng camp and drew his bow again. In front of the Northern Meng camp, Fan Lingyue stood in the cold wind and quietly looked in the direction of the Great Xia camp. Her eyes were emotionless. The light blue clothes were simple but revealed nobility. Fan Lingyue's identity was not difficult to recognize. When Ning Chan saw the light blue clothes, he felt a sense of familiarity. When he looked at the former's face, his body could not help but tremble. It was her, the woman he had coincidentally met in Moonfall City, Moon Spirit. Fan Ling fate really played tricks on people full of lies. It was no wonder that the 8th prince of the Great Xia dynasty had died so easily. It turned out that she had appeared at that time for this matter. There was no reason to take back a bow that had been bent. In this cold wind, Ning Chen's eyes were terrifyingly cold. Just as Fan Lingyue had said, she and Ning Chan were very similar people. Beneath their calm exterior hid an extremely heartless heart. They appreciated each other and even chatted happily with each other. However, none of this could stop the 2 of them from killing each other. The arrow in the cold wind was like a shooting star. The silver light was so dazzling in the night sky. However, before he could react, the arrow was already in front of him. However, this stunning arrow was caught by a hand. The young general appeared in front of Fan Lingyue and blocked this merciless arrow with 1 hand. Sister Qing Ning, let's go, Ning Chan said softly. Yes, Qing Ning replied. The 2 of them got on the carriage and left quickly. Not long after, they disappeared into the darkness once again. In front of the Northern Meng camp, the young general looked at the direction where the arrow came from and couldn't help but frown. He didn't understand who wanted to assassinate the military advisor. He is Ning Chan, Fan Lingyue said indifferently. She turned and walked towards the tent. She didn't expect that the 2 of them would still meet. What a pity for those 3,000 light cavalry soldiers. Fan Lingyue knew that the attack on the camp had failed. She had said before that they were very similar. Not only were they heartless, they were also scheming. The old general in the Great Xia camp was a mediocre person, but Ning Chan wasn't. On the contrary, not only was he not mediocre, he was also an extremely intelligent person. In the dark night, a blurry shadow flashed past the speeding carriage. Ning Chan sat in the carriage, his face slightly pale. That arrow just now was too much of a burden for him at the moment. He was already mentally prepared for the fact that he didn't manage to kill Fan Lingyue. However, he still wanted to say something. Fuck genius. That young general was obviously not much older than him, but he was at least at the peak of the 9th grade. Since when were there so many geniuses in this world? He had worked so hard to train for so long, and there were always experts guiding him. He didn't even lack Xiantian experts. However, after training for so long, he returned to the 4th or 5th grade. That old woman fate was really fucking unfair. When the two of them returned to the camp, the battle had already ended. The 3,000 light cavalry soldiers were basically shot into a hornet's nest. Even if 100 or 200 of them escaped in the dark, it wouldn't change anything. Zhang Sun saw the two of them coming back in the carriage. She frowned and asked, "Where did you go?" Ning Chan got off the carriage and said honestly, "I went to greet the military advisor of the Northern Ming Imperial Court." Qing Ning nodded at the side, indicating that this was indeed the case. Zhang Sun didn't ask anything else. She snorted and said, "Don't be so mischievous in the future." Ning Chan and Qing Ning looked at each other and immediately separated with tacit understanding. It seemed that Zhang Sun was in a good mood. She didn't ask anything else and didn't scold them. The 3,000 light cavalry didn't bring anything with them. Their horses and armor were either dead or broken, so there was nothing to retrieve. However, no matter what, this was still a victory. Most of the soldiers who were woken up in the middle of the night were excited. It turned out that the Empress had already predicted that the Northern Meng would attack the camp. In an instant, the sound of "Long live the Northern Meng" spread throughout the entire Great Xia camp. Zhang Sun accepted it calmly. After boosting the soldiers' morale, she returned to her tent to rest with a trace of relief. Ning Chan wanted to shout, I guessed it, I guessed it." Unfortunately, he didn't dare to. The soldiers of the Great Xia needed a hero who could step on colorful auspicious clouds. Obviously, the Empress, who had an extremely high reputation in the Great Xia, was the most suitable candidate. She was the tiger daughter of a general, and Zhang Sun was fully deserving of the title. Ning Chan also returned to his tent to rest. He was the most tired person tonight. That arrow had exhausted all his strength, and in the end, he didn't succeed. He had to pull Fan Lingyue away from the young general beside her. This was Ning Chen's last thought before he lost consciousness. The next day, Qing Ning, who hadn't seen Ning Chan for a long time, directly came to the tent. Just as she was about to pull him up from the bed, she felt that something was wrong. She was shocked when she touched his forehead. It was too hot. The military medical officer quickly arrived. After checking Ning Chen's pulse, his expression was extremely ugly. This pulse was even more chaotic than Wu Ho's. Zhang Sun also rushed over after hearing the news. After seeing Ning Chen's sickly red face, her brows furrowed even more. He was fine last night. What happened? Zhang Sun asked angrily. Seeing that the Empress was angry, the medical officer became even more nervous. He hurriedly said, Your Highness, this is caused by a cold. A cold? How could he have a cold? Zhang Sun was even more furious. In her worry, she completely lost her usual virtuous motherly appearance. The medical officer couldn't explain. He didn't know anything about the young man in front of him. He only knew that the latter was very trusted by the Empress and was always by her side. Your Highness. Qing Ning stepped forward and whispered a few words in Zhang Sun's ear. Nonsense. Zhang Sun was furious after hearing this and shouted. He doesn't know anything. Don't you know anything? How can you accompany him in his nonsense? Last night she didn't ask much. She thought that the two of them just went to the Northern Meng camp to take a look. Who would have thought that the two of them actually dared to assassinate that military advisor? This brat's body wasn't easy to stay awake, let alone attack. Couldn't he make her worry less? Treat this consort. If you can't, bring your head to see me. Zhang Sun snorted angrily and said, Yes. The medical officer trembled as he replied. Immediately, he hurriedly went out to prepare herbs and hot water. 6 hours later, Ning Chan woke up once. Looking at Zhang Sun beside him, he only said a few words before fainting again. Your Highness, no matter what, we must defend to the death. In addition, write a letter to the old Marquis and ask him to lead troops to intercept Northern Meng's provisions. We don't need too many people, 50,000 should be enough. Also, if Fan Lingyue really uses cavalry to attack, Your Highness, please give up the 30,000 cavalry in the camp. Great Xia can afford to fight, but we can also afford to waste them. It's worth exchanging 30,000 for 20,000. In addition, even if all of these 150,000 people die in battle, we can't retreat. A defeated army is like a landslide. She has 100,000 cavalry, we can't retreat. Even in the midst of his illness, Ning Chen's words were still calm and ruthless to the point that it was terrifying. With just one sentence, he directly gave up the lives of the 30,000 cavalry and even the soldiers in the camp. Rest well. We'll talk about other things when you're better. Zhang Sun couldn't bear it. She didn't agree or reject, but instead comforted him softly. Ning Chen smiled weakly. Before he could answer, he fell into a coma again. Qing Ning felt a chill all over. This was the first time she saw such a ruthless side of Ning Chen. Do you feel like he's become a different person? Zhang Sun didn't turn around and guess Qing Ning's thoughts. Yes, I'm not used to it, Qing Ning answered honestly. The weaker a person is, the less they know how to hide themselves. Ning Chen isn't an affectionate person to begin with. All the shyness and even harmlessness that he usually shows is just an act for others to see. The more you interact with him, the more you can feel the coldness that comes from his bones. After saying this, Zhang Sun sighed softly and continued, in the entire army, as long as nothing happens to you and me, I'm afraid that even if everyone else dies, he'll at most sigh emotionally and then turn around and won't take it to heart. I feel more and more fortunate that I forcefully dragged him into Weiyang Palace when we first met in the palace. Otherwise, if this kind of person became Great Xia's enemy, there would be a second military advisor in the world. The more Qing Ning heard Zhang Suan's words, the more shocked she became. She never thought that Ning Chen, who didn't dare to breathe loudly in front of her and Her Highness, would actually be someone that Her Highness thought so highly of, and even feared. Your Highness, Ning Chen won't harm Great Xia. Qing Ning couldn't help but say this. She could hear the fear in Her Highness's voice and couldn't help but defend herself. Haha. Zhang Sun laughed softly and said, Don't worry, I don't have any other intentions. Although he's ruthless, he still cares about that little bit of emotion in his heart. I never thought that he would betray Great Xia. Of course, that's on the premise that you and I are still alive. Chapter 77. Ning Chen's fever was very bad, and it didn't get better even when night fell. The doctor in the tent was very anxious. The Empress' words were still ringing in his ears, and his mind was completely focused on this young man. Zhang Sun listened to Ning Chen's suggestion and did their best to defend. Regardless of whether the Northern Meng Imperial Court's attack came or not, their side had already expressed their attitude of defending to the death. On Marquis Qinghe's side, the letter had already been sent out, and he would probably receive it soon. Xingqiao Pass was originally guarded by 50,000 soldiers, and with the addition of the 100,000 soldiers that Marquis Qinghe brought over, there were already more than 150,000 soldiers. Deploying 50,000 soldiers at any time wouldn't affect the situation in the short term. After Yangue City was broken, Fan Lingyue left less than 10,000 soldiers in the city to wait for the reinforcements to arrive without exhausting the military strength of the army. This was also the reason why Fan Lingyue chose to massacre the city. She wanted these 10,000 soldiers to truly form a fighting force of 10,000, and not be on tenterhooks all day long due to various sudden sneak attacks. Rations were something that war didn't lack. The Northern Meng Imperial Court's rations would definitely pass through Yangue City, and Marquis Qinghe's mission was to bring 50,000 soldiers to delay or even destroy the rations of the Northern Meng Imperial Court. The amount of rations needed for 300,000 soldiers was extremely terrifying, and it was impossible for the Northern Meng Imperial Court to gather them all at once. They could only transport them through Yangue City to the front lines. The reinforcements of the Northern Meng Imperial Court had already entered Yangue City. Currently, there were at least 60,000 soldiers guarding Yangue City. If they wanted to take back the city, they would need to expend at least 3 times the number of soldiers, and this was under the condition that the Northern Meng Imperial Court didn't send any reinforcements. Therefore, it was unrealistic to want to cut off the rations of the Northern Meng army once and for all. At the very least, the current Great Xia didn't have that many soldiers to spare. As long as Marquis Qinghe could cause trouble for the Northern Meng army's rations, it would be the greatest help to Zhang Sun and even the entire Great Xia. The current Great Xia needed time to catch a breather, and Duke Jingwu was in the imperial city to mobilize all the soldiers in the world. Ningqian was a true genius. Although his cultivation talent was average, he was smart and could see the key to the Great Xia at a glance. Zhang Sun was a person who knew how to make good use of people. She would seriously consider Ningqian's opinions. What the army lacked the most at the moment was talented generals. Ningqian's reminder would make her feel much more relaxed. It was precisely because of this that she couldn't leave this brat's help for even a moment. Ningqian's coma really made her very anxious and annoyed. At night the cold wind blew again. Ningqian still showed no signs of waking up. Zhang Sun paced back and forth outside the tent in frustration. His eldest brother was unconscious, and so was this fellow. Qing Ning didn't know anything about military affairs. She didn't even have anyone to discuss things with. "Your Highness, why don't you summon the first prince over?" Qing Ning suggested when she saw her eldest grandson's expression. The princes of Great Xia were all rare talents. Perhaps they could be of some help to Her Highness. "No, he's the crown prince. The future of the Great Xia depends on him. He can't be in any danger," Zhang Sun rejected without hesitation. Cough, cough. At this moment, a series of violent coughs resounded. The wheelchair turned, and Ningqian walked out wrapped tightly. His face was terrifyingly pale. "Your Highness is right. The first prince can't come. It's not suitable for him to come either," Ningqian said tiredly. The first prince was too righteous. He could be a Taiping sage, but it was not suitable for him to come to this battlefield full of schemes and plots. "When did you wake up?" Qing Ning asked with a joyful expression. However, before Ningqian could reply, Zhang Sun's angry voice sounded. "Who let you come out? Go back and rest." "Your Highness, I'm fine. I've slept for a day and my head is a little dizzy. I came out to get some fresh air. I'll go back in a while," Ningqian pleaded helplessly. Actually, he was a little worried about Zhang Sun and wanted to come out to take a look. The Great Xia dynasty had been established for more than 1,000 years. This was probably the first time that the current empress came out to oversee the army. One could imagine how much pressure Zhang Sun was under. The Great Xia dynasty was now surrounded by enemies. If they could delay the Northern Ming Imperial Court's army for one more day, they would gain one more day for the Great Xia dynasty. Just as he had said earlier, he would do everything he could to help Zhang Sun get through this difficult time. Zhang Sun frowned but did not say anything more. This kid's temper was even more stubborn than a bull. It was useless to persuade him. "Your Highness, I remember that there is a river 300 kilometers behind us. If we lose, send someone to destroy the bridge," Ningqian said calmly as he looked at the Northern Ming Imperial Court's army. "Is there no hope?" Zhang Sun sighed and asked. "If it was someone else, there might be hope. But our opponent is Fan Lingyue. We will definitely lose," Ningqian said honestly. He was speaking the truth. They were already at a disadvantage in terms of military strength. Moreover, Fan Lingyue had 100,000 cavalry, while they only had 30,000. This was a fatal difference. They could not stop him. He would do everything in his power to delay this day as much as possible until Great Xia could catch its breath. Ultimately, the Great Xia dynasty was still the strongest. As long as they were not defeated in a single breath, the final victor would be the Great Xia dynasty. To be honest, after this battle, it would be clear whether the Great Xia dynasty would lose or not. They could lose or even lose miserably, but they could not lose meaninglessly. Currently, their best choice was to fight a war of attrition. The longer they fought, the more desperate the battle would be, and the more disadvantageous it would be for the Northern Ming Imperial Court. "Your Highness, how is the situation in the east?" Ningqian thought for a moment and asked. The Eternal Night Cult and the Northern Ming Imperial Court had sent out their troops at the same time, forcing the Great Xia dynasty into a sorry state. Unlike the Northern Ming Imperial Court, who had a military advisor, the Eternal Night Cult relied on their tyrannical martial strength to open the path. An unparalleled martial monarch acted. From the martial Marquis to the generals of the Great Xia dynasty, no one could stop him. Monsters like Xiantian were truly troublesome existences. They have already broken through 2 cities. Fortunately, the Eternal Night Cult does not have many heavy cavalry, only 30,000. Otherwise, the Great Xia dynasty would have no need to fight this war, Zhang Sun said tiredly. It was rumored that there were no more than 10,000 heavy cavalry. Anything above 10,000 could not be lower. This was referring to the Eternal Night Cult's heavy cavalry. It would be an exaggeration to say that one of these terrifying soldiers could fight against 10. On the battlefield, they were practically invincible and undefeatable. Heavy cavalry had extremely high requirements for horses and soldiers. As a result, even the Eternal Night Cult, which had a deep foundation, was unable to train more of them. Unfortunately, although the Great Xia dynasty occupied the entire Central Plains, the rate of production of horses was too low, not to mention this type of heavy cavalry that had extremely high requirements for horses. Your Highness, is there no one in the Great Xia dynasty who can stop the Eternal Night Cult's heavy cavalry? Ningchen asked, puzzled. The Great Xia dynasty had 1,000 years of foundation. If it were to be crippled by 30,000 heavy cavalry, it would be too unjustifiable. The Great Xia dynasty had been unparalleled for so long, they would definitely have some trump cards. There is the military god, Marquis triumphant return, and the 100,000 Black Water Army under his command. Zhang Sun nodded with a grave expression. Then why has Marquis triumphant return not made a move? Ningchen asked, even more puzzled. He had also heard of the military god, the head of the 10 marquises. Since he was so powerful, why didn't he make a move? Could it be that he really wanted to wait until the Great Xia dynasty was completely crippled before he was willing to make a move? Because before His Majesty disappeared, he strictly prohibited Marquis triumphant return from making any moves. As she spoke, Zhang Xuan's expression was also somewhat puzzled. She was becoming more and more unable to understand the Great Xia dynasty's intentions. Ningchen was speechless. How the hell were they supposed to fight like this? They couldn't possibly have ordinary soldiers fight the Eternal Night Cult's heavy cavalry, right? And there was also that unparalleled martial monarch, who could stop him? Moreover, he had heard that the Eternal Night Cult had a Xiantian who had never appeared. Just what was the Eternal Night Cult planning? Ningchen discovered that there were still many things he didn't understand, especially regarding the Eternal Night Cult. His understanding was practically limited to the legends. He didn't know anything about the true internal situation of the cult. Northern Meng's barracks. Fan Lingyue was sitting in her tent. Her elegant face carried a trace of fatigue from many days of marching. After a long time, she softly asked, "When will they arrive?" Reporting to the military advisor, "They have already set off at noon. They will arrive in 3 days at the latest," the young general respectfully replied. "Tell Qing Wuyo to be careful. Don't let the spies of the Great Xia discover any clues," Fan Lingyue calmly reminded. Yes. The young general accepted the order, then immediately turned and left. Not being able to kill him back then has indeed attracted a lot of trouble. Fan Lingyue lightly sighed. She originally didn't plan to use them so quickly, but the Great Xia's determination to not appear at all forced her to use this trump card in advance. Allowing a tiger to return to the mountains would eventually lead to trouble. With Ningchen, there were too many variables. Unfortunately, Ximing Jian was heavily injured by that Prince Yan of the Great Xia, and couldn't attack again in a short period of time. Otherwise, eliminating this hidden danger as soon as possible would be the best method. Thinking of this, Fan Lingyue's beautiful eyes slightly narrowed. If she guessed correctly, Ningchen should have the same thoughts as her at this moment. She could give him a chance, but at the same time she was also giving herself a chance. A moment later, Fan Lingyue picked up her brush and wrote a letter. Shortly after, she opened her mouth and said, "Men. Present." An armored guard walked in. "Go to the Great Xia barracks and personally hand this letter to a young man named Ningchen. After arriving at the Great Xia barracks, directly say that you want to see this person. The Great Xia's empress will naturally introduce you to him." Fan Lingyue said indifferently as she handed over the letter. "Yes." The guard bowed and then also walked out. 2 hours later, the guard arrived at the Great Xia barracks and directly said that he was a messenger from the Northern Meng Imperial Court and wanted to see the Great Xia's empress. A general of the Great Xia came up and carefully searched his back, then immediately personally led him to Zhang Xuan's tent. "Empress, a messenger from Northern Meng requests to see you. Come in." In the tent, Zhang Sun was still awake and spoke. "Go in." The general pushed the guard and said in an unfriendly tone. Zhang Sun casually glanced at the Northern Meng guard in front of her and said indifferently, "Why did your military advisor ask you to come here?" The guard felt uncomfortable from Zhang Sun's glance, but he still braced himself and said, "Under the orders of the military advisor, I am here to deliver this letter to a person named Ning Chan in your barracks." Hearing this, a cold glint flashed across Zhang Sun's eyes. In an instant, the temperature of the entire tent seemed to drop. Chapter 78. Late at night, Ning Chan was invited to the commander's tent by Zhang Sun. Only then did he find out that Northern Meng's military advisor had sent a messenger to deliver a letter. After opening the letter, Ning Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. It seemed that Fan Lingyue was still impatient to get rid of him. Their thoughts were very similar. They both believed that getting rid of the other was the most direct and effective method. "Go back and tell your military advisor that Ning Chan will keep the appointment," Ning Chan replied calmly, crushing the letter into pieces. The Northern Meng guard cupped his fists and bowed, then turned and left. "Can't you see such an obvious trap? You can't go," Zhang Sun said angrily. Ning Chan shook his head. "Nyang, this is our only chance, and also our only hope for victory. I have to try no matter what." "No." Zhang Sun was unmoved and said angrily, Nyang, I've made up my mind. If you're really thinking about my safety, then let me think about how to keep tomorrow's appointment." Ning Chen's expression also darkened, not backing down at all. "You?" Zhang Sun trembled with anger. This brat was simply trying to anger her to death. At this time, Qing Ning also rushed over after hearing the news. Before she reached the tent, she heard the two arguing and quickly separated them temporarily. "How can you talk to Nyang like that?" Outside the tent, Qing Ning reprimanded in annoyance. "There's no time to explain. Sister Qing Ning, come with me." After speaking, Ning Chan turned his wheelchair and walked towards his tent. After arriving at his tent, Ning Chan immediately took a brush and wrote down a list of names saying, "Sister Qing Ning, go alone. Be careful. Remember, you must return before dawn." Qing Ning took the paper. After a moment of surprise, she nodded lightly, then quickly left under the cover of the night. Only Ning Chan was left in the tent. He sat there with his eyes closed, pondering silently. He was thinking about what Fan Lingyue's trump card was. Fan Lingyue didn't know martial arts. This was something that everyone knew. Moreover, he had been in close contact with her before, and he indeed didn't feel any martial arts aura from her. In this world, unless one reached Xiantian, it was absolutely impossible for martial artists to completely conceal their aura. If that was the case, then what was her trump card? Fan Lingyue's calculations were very accurate. He knew that he would not refuse such a tempting meeting, and he indeed could not refuse, because this was his only chance to help Chang Sun win this battle. What exactly was it? Ning Chan tried his best to think about it, but he still had no clue. In this world other than him, was there anyone else who possessed a weapon that could counter martial arts? There were only 6 hours left until daybreak. Ning Chan didn't move at all. He sat there thinking hard. This meeting was too important. He didn't want to make any mistakes. At daybreak, Qing Ning finally came back. Ning Chan said a few words to her, then chased her out of the tent. Then he went to work alone. Zhang Sun had come to visit several times, but Qing Ning shook her head and refused to let him in. At this time, she was the only one who could support him. Zhang Sun was so angry that his face turned pale, but he was still blocked by Qing Ning. Qing Ning's heart ached, but she was very stubborn. Actually, Ning Chan only said one sentence to her. "If I die this time, I'll still be smiling. Your Highness's body is priceless. No matter how strong you are, you won't be able to bear it much longer. I will fight for this opportunity with all my might. I'll leave the rest to you guys." Half a day later, Ning Chan came out wrapped in thick clothes. Qing Ning went up and pushed him, heading north. Zhang Sun quickly went up to stop him, but was blocked by a jade pendant. Ning Chan took out the jade pendant and said softly, "Your Highness, you said that you would agree to 2 of my requests back then. The first one has already been dropped. Now I want to say the second one, which is to ask you to let me pass." After saying this, Ning Chan respectfully bowed one last time, then walked around Zhang Sun and continued walking. Zhang Sun stood there in a daze with the jade pendant in his hand. His heart throbbed with pain. That day, she had promised him that she would fulfill 2 of his requests. The first was that he wanted to leave the palace, and she had refused without hesitation. Now, he had brought up the second request, and she could no longer say anything to refuse. In the cold wind, Qingning pushed the person who wanted to go north all the way north. In the north, the young general accompanied the person who wanted to go south all the way south. Before sunset, the 4 of them finally met face to face. Sister Qingning, you can go back. Ningchen glanced at Qingning and said softly, you can leave too. Fan Lingyue waved her hand and said calmly. Both of them looked worried, but they had no choice but to turn and leave, slowly disappearing into the night. After we parted in the imperial city of Granxia, I didn't expect that we would meet again under such circumstances. Fan Lingyue sighed softly and said. At that time she had things she needed to do, so she didn't care too much about Ning Chen's identity. She didn't expect that she would let go of the person she wanted to get rid of the most. Ning Chen also sighed. Maybe this was the so-called will of the heavens. At that time, if one of them recognized the other's identity first, they wouldn't be here today. Should I call you Ling or Fan Lingyue? Ning Chen's gaze was complicated. Who would have thought that the person who gave him the sword back then would become his enemy today? It's just a form of address. You hid your name and I also hid mine. It's not like we're lying to each other. Fan Lingyue walked behind Ning Chen and quietly pushed the wheelchair under the moonlight. She was still so natural and not pretentious. In this world, perhaps only he and she were the most similar and the most familiar people. Unfortunately, they had become enemies. Do the ideals you spoke of back then still count? Ning Chen didn't turn back and asked softly. Fan Lingyue nodded and said, I didn't lie about this. The world is peaceful and the people are prosperous? Ning Chen mocked softly. Ha! Fan Lingyue laughed softly and said, it's never changed. Does your so-called world include Granxia? Does your so-called people include the citizens of Granxia? The sarcasm in Ning Chen's voice grew thicker. Of course. Fan Lingyue's reply left no room for doubt. Ning Chen laughed coldly and his tone became calm again. I thought my skin was thick enough. I didn't expect to meet my match here. Fan Lingyue wasn't angry at all. Her beautiful face was still as calm as before, perhaps even with a trace of a smile. She always liked to talk to people like her, even if they didn't agree with each other. She had seen too many stupid people in this world. Ning Chen's appearance made her feel fear, but at the same time she was somewhat happy. Loneliness was always the scariest thing. Moreover, she had been lonely for a long time. Fan Lingyue, what are you thinking? The war started by Beimeng not only brought the flames of war to Granxia, it also brought disaster to Beimeng. How many of these 300,000 soldiers do you think will be able to return to Beimeng alive? Ning Chen asked in a low voice. I will do my best to bring them all back, Fan Lingyue said softly. Do you really think you can fight against the entire Granxia by yourself? Ning Chen laughed coldly. That's the truth, Fan Lingyue replied calmly. After saying that, the 2 of them fell into a short silence. After facing each other, although they were still standing together like before, they really didn't see eye to eye with each other. Fan Lingyue, what role did Granxia play in your so-called world peace? Ning Chen's eyes flashed with deep fatigue as he asked. Fan Lingyue laughed softly and said, Beimeng's world is too small. I need to bring them out and Granxia is the biggest obstacle in front of me. That's all. How do you know that the people of Beimeng despise their world for being small? Maybe this is just your own wishful thinking. Ning Chen couldn't suppress his emotions again and mocked. In front of this woman, he didn't need to hide himself, nor was there a need to. Fan Lingyue didn't answer but asked calmly, You're not a citizen of Beimeng. How do you know that they don't despise their world for being small? Humph, twisting words and forcing logic. Ning Chen was angry, but he couldn't say anything. He was indeed not a citizen of Beimeng and didn't know much about it. He only knew that it was indeed a region with poor resources. Fan Lingyue's words might be right, but her methods were too intense. Fan Lingyue, the 170,000 soldiers of Great Xia in Yangue City and millions of civilians were killed just because of a single sentence from you. Don't you feel the slightest bit of guilt? No, there will always be people who have to be sacrificed on the road to peace. You, me, and them. You're a lunatic. Ningchen mocked. He used to think that he understood this woman very well, but now he realized that he was wrong. This woman was a lunatic, and he didn't understand her at all. Fan Lingyue didn't refute and said indifferently, "It's because there are too many normal people in this world that this world is so abnormal. Why can Granxia occupy the rich central plains, but Beiming can only live in the cold north? The world belongs to the people of the world, and not Granxia." Ningchen was speechless. The difference between countries existed in every dynasty and even in different worlds. World peace had always been an ideal, and no one and no era could truly achieve it. Fan Lingyue, if you continue like this, you will destroy Granxia and the Northern Ming royal court. In this world, it's impossible for true peace and fairness to appear. Not in the past, not in the future. Ningchen sighed and advised. "You haven't tried, how do you know it's impossible?" Fan Lingyue sneered and continued, "Do you know what's the biggest difference between us? You don't want to try because you hate failure. But I don't care about these things. So what if I fail? If I fail, I'll just give up my life to be buried with the people of the world. But no matter what, I've already tried. On the road to world peace, I Fan Lingyue don't want to regret it and won't regret it." In the cold wind, Fan Lingyue stood upright, her beautiful face filled with determination and coldness. Her life was so short, and she didn't want to see the world still like this when she died. Ningchen tidied his clothes and felt a little cold. The weather in the north really made him unhappy. It was already spring, but it was still so cold. Chapter 79. The two of them finally had nothing to say to each other. In the past, they were just acquaintances, but now they had nothing to say to each other. It wasn't a simple difference in their standpoints, but the way they looked at things and did things was completely different. Fan Lingyue's methods were too intense. Ningchen didn't like it. Ningchen also thought too much before doing things. Fan Lingyue also felt that it was shameless. Ningchen couldn't refute Fan Lingyue. He couldn't even prove whether her methods were right or wrong. There weren't so many right and wrong in this world, the biggest right and wrong had always been the human heart. If Fan Lingyue succeeded, 100 years later, she would be a good minister who created a prosperous world in the eyes of the world. If she failed, she would only be left with a bad reputation. Unfortunately, she didn't care about this. What she cared about was just as she said, the world was peaceful and the people were prosperous. Ningchen never doubted the sincerity of Fan Lingyue's words. He mocked her only because he didn't like her methods. The two of them finally stopped. Ningchen sighed, "Let's stop here." "Okay." Fan Lingyue nodded. It was time to stop. Although they were similar people, they weren't on the same path. They couldn't continue walking forever. "I'm very curious, how are you going to get rid of me here?" A cold wind blew past. Ningchen narrowed his eyes. He still couldn't guess what her trump card was. There were only the two of them here. Although he was seriously injured, it was more than enough to deal with a weak girl who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. He never liked people walking behind him, but Fan Lingyue was an exception. Firstly, it was because the two of them really had a good chat before, and secondly, it was because Fan Lingyue didn't know martial arts. "You'll know soon enough." Before she finished speaking, Fan Lingyue raised her palm and pressed it against Ningchen's back. Her majestic true qi suddenly erupted, leaving no trace of life. This palm came without any warning. It was the most unimaginable result. At this moment, time seemed to slowly stop, unable to move forward. How could? Ningchen didn't have time to say the words in his heart. He had calculated everything, but he didn't expect Fan Lingyue to know martial arts. He originally thought that he valued her a lot, but he didn't expect that in the end he still underestimated her. He underestimated this girl who even deceived the world. Who said that the Northern Ming's military advisor didn't know martial arts? Looking at it now, it was the stupidest thing in the world. However, after a moment of surprise, Ningchen still smiled. His smile was so bright that flowers bloomed on his face. Boom! At the next moment, an earth-shattering explosion rang out in the dark night like a sudden clap of thunder. The dazzling light could be seen from 100 li away. Ningchen, military advisor. Several miles away, Qing Ning and the young general, who had been paying attention to the situation, were shocked. They stomped their feet and flew toward the center of the explosion. In front of the Great Xia camp, Zhang Sun stood outside the tent. His pupils constricted as he gazed at the north, and an extremely ominous premonition arose in his heart. The night was enchanting. The bright moon hung high in the sky, sprinkling down a cold waterfall. Two figures, one from the south and one from the north, were rushing over at an extremely fast speed. They were like two shooting stars in the night sky, so fast that it was shocking. The cold wind was biting cold, but the two people who had fainted on the ground could no longer see this scene. There were only scars all around them, quietly telling the desolation of the night. Ningqian didn't expect Fan Lingyue to have the Book of Chaos, which could conceal any aura. Fan Lingyue also didn't expect that gunpowder, other than being ignited by fire, would also explode under great pressure. He couldn't guess her trump card, so he transmigrated into a body full of gunpowder and a few flamethrowers. He originally planned to use them to save his life at a critical moment, but he didn't expect to be hit by Fan Lingyue's palm, saving him all the trouble. Qing Ning and the young general arrived at the same time. After a brief exchange of glances, their palms collided with each other. Soon after, they swept up the figures on the ground and left in a flash of light. Not long after, the northern Meng camp and the Great Xia camp fell into great chaos. The furious Zhang Sun and the young general almost overturned the entire tent. They poured panaceas and miraculous medicines into the mouths of the people on the bed, only hoping that they could save the lives of the people on the bed. However, the injuries of the two were too severe. The panaceas and miraculous medicines they usually used were now like dregs, not having the slightest effect. One day later, the news of the military advisor of the northern Meng being seriously injured and in a coma spread throughout the world, shocking everyone. No one expected the military advisor of the northern Meng to be injured at this time. This was a shocking matter. Once the northern Meng army lost this military advisor, the threat of the army would be reduced by at least half. The Great Xia could take a breather and even free up their hands to deal with the eternal night cult and the chaos of the 7 cities. The lords of the 7 cities were in a state of panic. This sudden change disrupted all their arrangements. With the military advisor of the northern Meng injured, no one could pin down most of the Great Xia's energy. Once this powerful dynasty that had been invincible for thousands of years took a breather, the lords of the 7 cities would probably deal with them first. In the residence of Prince Yu of the southern border, Prince Yu's face was ashen. He didn't expect such a thing to happen. Now he couldn't hide anymore even if he wanted to. If the lords of the 7 cities were defeated, he couldn't escape the fate of being exposed either. He had the blood of the royal family. Now that the fate of Emperor Xia was unknown, he might still have a chance if he fought under this banner. Half a day later, a shocking battle broke out in Prince Yu's residence. Under the cover of 7 ninth-level masters and 2 half-step innate masters, Prince Yu finally escaped from Prince Yu's residence. However, none of the 7 ninth-level masters and 2 half-step innate masters survived. The green and red swords in the hands of Prince Yen were stained with blood. He mercilessly killed everyone who stood in his way. Since then, the masters that Prince Yu had recruited over the years were all wiped out. Not a single one was left. Soon, Prince Yu came to the light and became the ruler of the chaos of the 7 cities. He ordered the rebel army to attack the imperial city of the Great Xia. However, at this critical moment, Emperor Xia, who had been missing for many days, appeared. Emperor Xia returned to the Heavenly Mandate Palace. Without any explanation, he took back all the political and military power and immediately ordered Marquis triumphant return to send troops to suppress the rebellion of the 7 cities. With the appearance of the god of war, the situation changed. The might of the 100,000 Black Water Army once again shocked the world. The 250,000-strong rebel army of the 7 cities was as vulnerable as tofu. In 3 days they were defeated again and again. Eunuch Pei, who was by Emperor Xia's side, made his move. He killed all the masters of the 7 cities like a whirlwind. Even the half-step innate masters were not spared. Only then did the world discover in horror that the eunuch by Emperor Xia's side was actually a master of the innate level. No one knew how this eunuch managed to hide from the world, but there was no doubt that this old man was truly a master of the innate level. In the end, the rebellion of the 7 cities, from the lords of the cities to the ordinary generals, was completely wiped out. Emperor Xia announced his return in such a cold and merciless way, completely shocking the world. Prince Yu's ears and nose were cut off by Emperor Xia for his crime of rebellion. He fell from the city wall and was hanged alive. His miserable screams lasted for 3 days, scaring the children into crying in the middle of the night. There was silence within the great Xia dynasty. There was not a single sound of dissent. All of the courtiers were terrified of Emperor Xia, who sat on the dragon throne of the heavenly mandate palace. Only now did the people of the world, and even the people of the great Xia, realize that the great Xia dynasty was in such a sorry state and couldn't withstand a single blow from Emperor Xia. His purpose was to draw out the hidden dangers within the great Xia dynasty. Now that the hidden dangers were eliminated, Emperor Xia, who had been enduring for a long time, finally showed his ferocious fangs. On the second day after the rebellion ended, Marquis triumphant returned and the Black Water Army headed east in the direction of the heavy cavalry of the Divine Sect. On the northern battlefield, the 200,000 soldiers gathered by the 13 cities quickly rushed to the camp of Marquis Taiping to provide support. They wanted to completely annihilate the northern Ming army before the military advisor woke up. In the camp of Marquis Taiping, Zhang Sun, who had been dealt with one blow after another, looked extremely haggard. She held a letter in her hand, and tears streaked across her beautiful eyes. This was the letter that Ning Chun left in the tent. When he left, he was still worried about her, so he gave her a final warning. Your Highness, if I don't come back, it means that I failed. Remember what I said to you. You must defend to the death. Fan Lingyue is unwilling to fight us head-on, so defending to the death is the best choice. In addition, Fan Lingyue is an extremely smart person. She will definitely have a backup plan. If something irreversible happens, Your Highness, remember to destroy that bridge. Horses are different from humans. They are still afraid of water. Even if Fan Lingyue finds a boat, it will be useless. In the end, Emperor Xia is very likely not dead. Your Highness, you only need to hold on until Emperor Xia comes out again. You are the Empress. No matter how ruthless Emperor Xia is, he can't just watch as something happens to you. He will definitely send troops to save you. Ning Chun presents his last words. The words in black and white were still vivid in her eyes. Zhang Sun finally couldn't hold back the tears in her eyes, and they fell down. Why did he always not listen to her? Your Highness. Qing Ning stood at the side, holding back her sadness, and advised, Your Highness, he is not dead yet. The letter has already reached Prince Yan. I believe Prince Yan will be here soon. Prince Yan was a Xiantian. At this time, she could only hope that as a Xiantian, Prince Yan would have a way to save his life. Although she knew that the chances were slim, although she knew that she was lying to herself, she still didn't want to believe that he would die like this. He was always so lucky, escaping calamity after calamity. This time would definitely be no exception. A day later, Prince Yan arrived. Without saying anything, he directly took Ning Chun away. Barbarian Dynasty, Princess Side Courtyard. A man sat on the bed, clutching her chest. Her small face was pale. She felt that something had happened to him and it was a very, very big thing. She wanted to look for him, but she promised her father that she wouldn't look for him for the time being. He said that he had to keep his word. She couldn't disappoint him. She didn't want her father to worry, so she had been eating, drinking medicine, and sleeping obediently. However, she really couldn't pretend anymore. Northern Ming Army Camp. Fan Lingyue was still lying quietly on the bed, her face pale. Beside her, the young general was silent, guarding her day and night. At the last moment, Fan Lingyue circulated all her true qi in front of her to protect her. The Chaos Scroll also appeared to protect her, but her internal organs were still injured by the violent explosion, and she fell into a coma. The Northern Ming Army's morale was at its lowest. Without the military advisor, no one thought that they could continue. The 10,000 soldiers led by Qing Wuyo had already arrived a few days ago. They were stationed in the army camp, silently waiting for the military advisor to wake up. Chapter 80. In the west of Wuxia, the invincible martial monarch and the invincible martial Marquis finally met. The Divine Sect's armored cavalry against the Black Water Army. A true battle of generals against generals, soldiers against soldiers. Brilliance in Wu Ho's hand clashed with desolation in Wu Jun's hand. The battle between the saber and the halberd of the war god shook the heavens and earth, causing the sun and moon to lose their splendor. The invincible cavalry of the god's sect finally stopped in front of the Blackwater army. Neither side gained an advantage. After a day of fierce fighting, they had to stop temporarily. The undefeated martial monarch was injured, and the world was once again shocked. The head of the 10 marquises of the Great Xia, Marquis Triumphant Xian, was actually an exceptional expert that did not belong to the 5 strongest experts in the world. For a time, the entire world was guessing what exactly was in the palace of the Great Xia dynasty that could hide from the eyes of the world. The phenomenon of breaking through to the Xiantian realm was earth-shattering. Unless one had some kind of precious treasure, it was impossible to cover up the pillar of light that soared into the sky. The martial monarch was injured but not defeated. Marquis Triumphant Return was unable to kill the martial monarch. In fact, there was no one in the world who could kill the martial monarch. The strength of a martial lord did not only lie in his incomparably powerful strength, but also in his almost immortal and indestructible physique. In this world there were always some unreasonable people, and martial lords were one of them. It could be said that the eternal night cult would not be defeated as long as they could not kill the martial lord. This was a problem that the Great Xia had to overcome. But no matter what, the war in the west of Great Xia was temporarily stabilized because of the appearance of Marquis Kaishian. For a short period of time no one could do anything to the other. On the other side of the battlefield, the reinforcements from the north of Great Xia were much slower than the Blackwater army, which could travel 150 kilometers in a day. Ordinary soldiers could not compare to the Blackwater army, which was made up entirely of warriors. Within the northern Meng camp, panic had started to spread. The 200,000 reinforcements of Great Xia, and the 150,000 soldiers of the Taiping camp, had surpassed them in terms of numbers. The unconscious military advisor became the only hope in the hearts of the northern Meng army. As long as the military advisor woke up, he would definitely be able to lead them out of this crisis. However, to their disappointment, the military counselor had yet to wake up when the reinforcements from Great Xia arrived. The commander of the Great Xia reinforcements was a direct descendant of Emperor Xia, General Wuxia. When he arrived, he took over all military power and read out Emperor Xia's decree, asking Zhang Sun to return to the palace. Zhang Sun received the order and took the unconscious Marquis Taiping away. Before leaving, he repeatedly reminded Wuxia to focus on defense and attack as support. When the northern Meng army could not help but reveal the trump card left by Fan Lingyue, then he would make targeted arrangements. She believed in Ning Chen's judgment. Northern Meng's military advisor must have a hidden card. If they attacked rashly, they might suffer a great loss. Wuxia responded respectfully. After Zhang Sun left, he snorted and returned to the camp. This was his best chance to be conferred the title of Marquis, so how could he not come out? He wanted to take advantage of the Northern Meng military advisor's injury to completely crush the Northern Meng army in one fell swoop. On the second day after Zhang Sun left, Wuxia gave the order to break camp. 50,000 cavalrymen were the vanguard. 30,000 shield-armored soldiers and 20,000 archers took turns covering and following closely behind. The remaining 250,000 soldiers continued to follow, pressing towards the northern Meng imperial court like a tide. However, something that terrified the Great Xia soldiers happened. A group of heavily armored cavalrymen appeared from the northern Meng imperial court's camp. There were at least 10,000 of them. The flood of molten iron instantly crushed the 50,000 cavalrymen of Great Xia. Under the attack of the northern Meng heavy cavalry, the valiant shield-armored soldiers were immediately scattered. The 20,000 archers were completely useless and were swallowed by the flood in the blink of an eye. Subsequently, the 100,000 cavalrymen of the northern Meng imperial court suddenly moved, completely pushing the Great Xia soldiers into the abyss of death. Wherever the butcher's knife went, blood flowed like a river. When the northern Meng soldiers who were already in low spirits saw this, their morale was immediately boosted. They followed behind the 100,000 cavalrymen and crazily vented the anger in their hearts. The war lasted for an entire day and night, but it had already become a one-sided massacre. On the second day, the 35-man army of Great Xia was completely wiped out. Corpses were everywhere within a radius of 100 miles. Wuxia fled. He was scared out of his wits. In his fear, he forgot Zhang Xuan's instructions. If the army was defeated, he was to immediately destroy the bridge behind him. After the great victory, the 100,000 cavalrymen of northern Meng traveled 300 miles in a day and stepped over the most important Lu Yueqiao. From then on, they truly entered the hinterland of the Central Plains. When Zhang Sun, who was still on the road, heard the news, his face instantly turned pale. He leaned weakly against the carriage and couldn't say a word. Great Xia was in trouble. This was the thought in everyone's mind. No one had expected such a huge reversal of events. Originally, they thought that with the return of Emperor Xia and the deployment of the military god, Great Xia would be in an invincible position. However, they didn't expect such a shocking thing to happen in the northern battlefield, where there shouldn't have been any problems. The military advisor of northern Meng hadn't woken up yet, but the backup plan she had set up had once again dealt a heavy blow to Great Xia. The 10,000 cavalrymen of northern Meng were wearing the same heavy armor as the cavalrymen of the divine sect. They were invulnerable, and even ordinary warriors would find it difficult to contend with them. Great Xia had lost miserably and sullenly. However, the most important thing was that Great Xia had lost the initiative. The northern Meng army had entered the hinterland of the Central Plains. The issue of provisions that they had been worrying about for a long time could be alleviated to a large extent. The Central Plains was rich and had no lack of provisions. After this battle, the northern Meng army that had entered the Central Plains could be said to be like birds flying in the sky. No one could predict their attack route anymore. The current Emperor Xia had endured for so long, but in the end, he still made a mistake in the use of people. Zhuoqiuxing was a talented general, not a talented commander. He was good at commanding troops and fighting wars, but he was far from good at strategizing. His only mistake had become the key to deciding the outcome of the war. After Zhang Sun returned to the palace, she went straight to Weiyang Palace. She didn't even see Emperor Xia. She didn't want to see Emperor Xia and had nothing to say to him. In the Heavenly Mandate Palace, Emperor Xia was even older. His eyes were even more ruthless. He wasn't wrong. He was the Emperor of Great Xia. No matter what, he couldn't be wrong. Zhuoqiuxing was executed by 1,000 cuts. His blood dyed more than half of the execution platform red. His shrill cries continued for an entire day. Emperor Xia was becoming more and more ruthless. He was even more ruthless than before. The entire court was silent. Everyone was in danger. They were afraid that they would be killed if they said something wrong. While the 3rd prince and the 10th prince were restraining themselves on the surface, they were moving more frequently in secret. They could see that Emperor Xia didn't have much time left. The northern Ming army had become a sharp sword hanging over Great Xia's head. Great Xia kept organizing troops to stop them, but they were evaded time and time again. Everyone could see that the generals of the northern Ming imperial court were trying their best to preserve their strength and wait for the military advisor to wake up. Great Xia's territory was too big. If the northern Ming army wanted to evade, no one could stop them in a short period of time. Emperor Xia gave 3 orders at once. He urgently summoned Marquis Bai, Marquis Xiang, and Marquis Jiyu back to the capital. Apart from the necessary defense forces, each of them led 100,000 troops back as reinforcements. This was the first time that 3 marquises had issued orders at once since the founding of Great Xia. It could be seen that Great Xia was truly anxious this time. The atmosphere in the northern Ming army also became tense. The 3 marquises of Great Xia had returned. In addition to the mobilized troops, they could gather at least 500,000 troops. This was extremely disadvantageous for them. However, they didn't dare to rashly attack the south. Every stronghold of Great Xia was impregnable. If they continued to attack, the 300,000 troops would be wiped out before the military advisor woke up. In this world, not everyone could scheme against the world with their own wisdom like the military advisor. In the east of Great Xia, in the number 1 shrine of Evernight, the martial lord was sitting high above. The 3 generals below him were kneeling respectfully. Every one of them was at least at the peak of the 9th rank. Some even showed signs of breaking through. After the divine sect's heavy cavalry took down 2 cities, they completely destroyed them. Wherever the flames of war passed, not even a blade of grass was left. The martial lord was injured and returned to the number 1 shrine to recuperate. The 3 generals followed him back. The 30,000 heavy cavalry also returned to the borders of Great Xia to await orders. The valiance of Marquis Kaishian and the Blackwater army was unexpected. This military god of Great Xia rarely showed himself. They only knew that he was a powerful figure, but they didn't expect him to be this powerful. The martial lord's injuries weren't serious and he recovered quickly. His special constitution had an unimaginable self-healing ability. The reason he returned to recuperate was to ensure that his body would be in perfect condition for the next battle. The Great Xia's Marquis Kaishian was a formidable opponent. He needed to treat him seriously. "Is that woman from Northern Meng still not awake?" the martial lord asked from above the main hall. Reporting to the martial lord, according to the news, Fan Lingyue is seriously injured. There's no possibility of her waking up in a short period of time, a red-clothed general reported respectfully. The martial lord frowned. Without that woman, the Northern Meng army was no different from a toothless tiger. This was very bad news for the divine sect. Once Great Xia seized the opportunity to destroy the Northern Meng army, they would definitely gather all their forces to resist the divine sect's invasion. In a direct confrontation, the divine sect would definitely suffer heavy losses. Take a divine heaven pill and send it to the Northern Meng camp. Have that woman wake up as soon as possible, the martial lord ordered. Yes. The red-clothed general stood up and left. Military advisor of Northern Meng, don't disappoint me. After the red-clothed general left, the martial lord closed his eyes and softly muttered. The divine sect wasn't ready to start an all-out war with Great Xia. At this time he didn't want anything to happen to Fan Lingyue. In the Northern Meng imperial court, a green light streaked across the sky. After appearing for a short while, it turned into a streak of light and flew away. Half a day later, in a desolate area of the Northern Meng imperial court, the green light appeared once more. With a wave of his hand, he threw the person in his hand into the lake. He had heard that the Northern Meng imperial court had a heavenly lake, so he came here. As for whether or not he could save this kid's life, he had to try first. Boom! At this moment, the winds and clouds in the sky suddenly changed. A terrifying intent quickly descended, as if angered by this intruder. You name. The rumbling voice seemed to come from beyond the 9 heavens. A powerful pressure stirred up the surrounding winds and caused the void to tremble. Great Xia Prince Yan. Prince Yan stood in the wild wind. His young face was indifferent. He was not moved at all. Translator. Nyerbo Studio Editor. Nyerbo Studio. His green clothes and black hair fluttered in the wind. This was the legend of Great Xia. Chapter 81. There was only one Khanate master in the Northern Meng imperial court, and that was the imperial preceptor. What was the most precious thing in the Northern Meng? The imperial preceptor and the heavenly lake. The imperial preceptor was just an idiot in the eyes of the imperial preceptor. But that idiot was really good at fighting and was one of the 5 strongest people in the world. There were 3 disasters and 5 tribulations in the Khanate realm. It was a punishment from the heavens and also a training for martial arts. The strongest person could go through the 3 disasters and the 5 tribulations. When they reached the peak, they could summon the dragon gate that had disappeared for a long time. Currently, the 5 most powerful people in the world had basically all gone through 5 tribulations and experienced 3 of them. Among the 5, the dean of the Tiansong Academy, the martial lord of the Eternal Night Sect, the abbot of the Dewey Temple and the imperial preceptor with the golden staff of the Northern Meng imperial court had already shown themselves. The only person who hadn't shown himself was also in the Eternal Night Sect. It was said that he was a peerless cultivator who could rival a martial lord. Those 5 were recognized as the strongest people in the world. They were also the earliest Khanate masters. Any one of them could easily beat up a new Khanate master. The 3 disasters and the 5 tribulations weren't on the same level. Although the legends of the Xia dynasty were geniuses, they hadn't cultivated for long and hadn't gone through the 5 tribulations yet. The imperial preceptor didn't care. Ningchen needed to go to the heavenly lake to recover. Before that, he just needed to stop that idiot. The imperial preceptor landed beside the heavenly lake. The imperial preceptor went forward and grabbed the profound condensation sword. He didn't pull it out but took back a part of his power. Boom! At that moment, a golden light suddenly struck down from the sky. It was like thunder from the 9 heavens. With a light kong sound, the green sword flew out and blocked the sudden attack in the air. He had already said that this idiot had nothing but martial prowess, let alone any sense of shame. The green sword flew into the Imperial Preceptor's hand. The Imperial Preceptor slashed at the sky and a terrifying crack appeared in the sky. With a boom, it crashed towards the person who was hiding his head and tail. "You've angered me." A furious voice was transmitted from the sky. Immediately, a large hand came pressing down. The 5 fingers were like 5 mountains, while the palm was like a golden sky that covered a 10,000 feet radius. Facing the giant palm, Prince Yen was not scared at all. He clenched his right hand and the red sword flew out. Then the cyan and red sword merged and pointed to the sky. A beam of cyan and red sword light shot into the sky and broke the giant palm. Clang! An old figure appeared, smashing down on Prince Yen with a golden staff. There was no warning, but it was still blocked by the green sword. The sword had a sword aura, so it was much faster than a person's reaction. This kind of sneak attack was meaningless to him. Northern Meng's golden staff Imperial Tutor is still so shameless, Prince Yen said indifferently as he swung his sword and knocked away the golden staff. "Kid, you're not big, but you talk big." The golden staff Imperial Tutor took 2 steps back and sneered. As soon as he finished speaking, the golden staff Imperial Advisor made a grabbing motion with his right hand. An invisible force broke through the restrictions of space and attempted to grab Ning Chun out of the heavenly lake. Prince Yen moved his feet and the red sword slashed through the air. With a bang, it cut off the force that was heading towards Ning Chun. In the next moment, Prince Yen moved again. He swung his sword and slashed towards the golden staff Imperial Tutor. Boom! The sword and staff collided. A fierce wind roared and surged. Around the two, the ground cracked and rocks flew everywhere. Cyan and red breath at the same time, absolute chi. Prince Yan's spirit shivered. His body moved and he used his shocking martial arts again. His 2 swords were like lightning, extremely fast. The cyan and red swords danced and dazzled the eyes. In that instant, countless swords flashed past. The golden staff Imperial Tutor's pupils constricted. He retreated again and again, but he still could not avoid the lightning-like swords. In the blink of an eye, he was injured by 3 swords. The golden staff Imperial Tutor was furious. The humiliation made him lose his mind. He was actually injured by a junior. This was an unbearable humiliation. The golden staff Imperial Tutor raised his golden staff Imperial Tutor. Thousands of golden rays illuminated the world. The golden staff Imperial Tutor mobilized the power of heaven and earth. He wanted to send the junior in front of him to hell. Prince Yen glanced at the figure in the heavenly lake and could not help but frown. Was this lousy lake even useful? With a wave of his left hand, the cyan sword turned into a ray of light and entered the sword frame. Immediately after, he clenched his fist and the Ningyun flew out. The black light made people's hearts palpitate. Prince Yan's figure flashed and slashed towards the golden staff Imperial Tutor. Immediately, the light on the golden staff Imperial Tutor disappeared. Even the wind and clouds that were being pulled by the golden staff Imperial Tutor quickly stopped. Sealing sword. The golden staff Imperial Tutor was shocked. Didn't this sword go missing? How did it fall into his hands? In the moment of shock, the red light flashed past. The golden staff Imperial Tutor immediately reacted and retreated 10 meters. At this moment, a painful groan was heard from the heavenly lake. Immediately after, silver and yellow lights flickered and swallowed the spiritual chi in the heavenly lake. The 2 pages of the heavenly book appeared and floated above the cyclone in his dantian. Vaguely, the 2 pages of the heavenly book were broken into pieces and lost their light. When the heavenly book exploded, it automatically protected its owner and barely saved Ning Chen's life. The broken pages of the heavenly book kept absorbing spiritual chi. The 2 cyclones also spun violently and kept expanding. In Ning Chen's body, the 4 heaven reversal pills that he had taken earlier also exploded with medicinal power that was far from being used up. They destroyed and regenerated crazily. The heavenly book, the heavenly lake, and the heaven reversal pills worked together and finally unleashed their power. After the destruction, The power of regeneration took over and quickly repaired Ning Chen's almost destroyed body. The painful groan was heard again. Ning Chen's body began to tremble. Every part of his body was regenerating. With the help of the three heavens, he returned to his original state. Gradually, the heavenly book quieted down and the heavenly lake calmed down. In the blink of an eye, the sky dispersed and Ning Chen slowly opened his eyes. When he first opened his eyes, there were no ripples, no spirit, and no emotions. After a moment, emotions poured into his eyes. His memories returned and he gradually understood everything. Let's go. Prince Yen waved his two swords and made two moves at the same time. Immediately, he turned into a ray of light and left with the awakened Ning Chen. The golden staff state preceptor blocked the two rays of sword light with an ashen face. He looked at the two people who disappeared, but it was too late to chase after them. In the northern Ming camp, the red-clothed warrior under the martial monarch sent a divine heaven pill to help Fan Lingyue wake up earlier. The young general sent the pill to the military advisor's tent. After a while, he walked out and thanked the red-clothed warrior and the martial monarch for their good intentions. The red-clothed warrior left without stopping. The battlefield in the east was still unstable, and there was a possibility of another war breaking out at any time. He had to go back and wait for orders. Another 7 days later, the three martial monarchs of the Great Xia each led their army from afar. They didn't return to the imperial city but went directly north to intercept the northern Ming army. The three martial monarchs arrived almost at the same time. After several encirclements, they finally succeeded in blocking the path of the northern Ming army in front of Heaven's Gate. This was the most impregnable pass of the Great Xia. If the army wanted to go south, this was the only way. The three martial monarchs led the army north through Heaven's Gate and spent a lot of effort to force the northern Ming army into a dead end. 300,000 against 300,000, no one had the upper hand. Comparatively speaking, northern Ming had the advantage of 10,000 heavy cavalry and 100,000 iron cavalry. Their chances of victory were much higher. However, the Great Xia didn't seek victory. They only sought to delay. As long as they delayed the northern Ming army, the Great Xia army would arrive continuously until the northern Ming army was completely wiped out. The northern Ming army obviously didn't want to go head-to-head with the three martial monarchs of the Great Xia. They tried their best to stall for time while waiting for an opportunity to break out. However, the martial monarchs of the Great Xia weren't idiots like Swordsmanship. Every one of them was good at war and strategizing. The three of them worked together and naturally wouldn't give the northern Ming army any chances. Step by step, they didn't rush and surrounded the northern Ming army in a triangular formation. The northern Ming army was in a desperate situation. Behind, left, and right there were martial monarchs of the Great Xia guarding. In front of them was the impregnable pass of the Great Xia. The only choice was to force their way out. However, this would definitely result in heavy losses. At this critical moment, an unexpected order was given from the northern Ming commander's tent. They were to break through the pass immediately. The beautiful figure that walked out was still as beautiful as before. However, her face was even paler. The impregnable pass was over 100 feet long, and was made of molten iron and gold wood. Without a mechanism, it was impossible to open it with human strength. Unless it was an innate expert who could use the power of heaven and earth. However, there were no innate experts in the northern Ming army. The strongest person was the young general. He was at the peak of grade 9 but still wasn't an innate expert. With the impregnable gate and the Great Xia soldiers guarding Heaven's Gate, the northern Ming army would have to lose at least 100,000 soldiers to have any hope of breaking through this impregnable pass. No one knew what the northern Ming military advisor was thinking. Similarly, no one knew when the northern Ming military advisor woke up. 10,000 heavy armored cavalrymen were in front and 100,000 northern Ming cavalrymen were behind them. Fan Lingyue stood in front of the formation and looked at the immortal pass in front of him. Begin. Yes. The young general respectfully accepted the order. Immediately, the aura around his body started to rise and soar. The next moment, a pillar of light suddenly shot up into the sky, shocking the entire world. The three martial monarchs of the Great Xia were also shocked. As if they had thought of something terrifying, they hurriedly ordered the army to stop at all costs. However, it was already too late. The young general who had reached the innate realm quickly passed the demonic tribulation of the 3 calamities and 5 tribulations. Immediately, he turned into a stream of light and rushed into the impregnable pass. He mercilessly killed all the guards and the 3 consecrated experts. The gate of Heaven's Gate, which had not been broken through for 1,000 years, slowly opened. Under Fan Lingyue's order, the Iron Hooves stepped into the impregnable pass and destroyed all resistance. After the Northern Meng army entered, the gate of the impregnable pass closed with a bang. The 3 martial monarchs of the Great Xia, along with the 300,000 soldiers, were locked outside the pass and had no chance of entering. Find the mechanism diagram and kill everyone who knows about it. After entering the pass, Fan Lingyue coldly and mercilessly ordered. Yes, the young general accepted the order. Leave 50,000 people behind to guard the pass. You stay too. Fan Lingyue narrowed his eyes and continued to look at the territory of the Great Xia. Yes, the young general was startled. In the end, he still nodded respectfully. Chapter 82. The news of Dexia's gate being breached was like thunder. Behind this, the Northern Ming military advisor once again played a terrifying role. The Northern Ming army was previously forced into a corner by the 3 martial marquises of Dexia, and retreated all the way to Heaven's Gate. Who would have thought that such a shocking change would occur at such a crucial moment? The young general beside the Northern Ming military advisor breaking through to the Xiantian stage was too coincidental. It was so coincidental that it sent chills down everyone's spine. It was impossible to suppress the Xiantian stage for a long time. When one was about to break through, it was extremely difficult to even suppress it for a day. So, was this really a coincidence? No one in the world would believe that such a terrifying coincidence could exist. Not only did the Northern Ming army, which was already in a desperate situation, manage to break through the encirclement, but they also completely blocked the 3 martial marquises of Dexia and their 300,000-strong army outside the gate. At this moment, even a fool would know that something was amiss, but they couldn't guess what the problem was. In the entire Northern Ming army, only one person knew the truth. Even the young general was kept in the dark most of the time. Dexia's Heaven's Gate was the #1 pass in the Central Plains. Its terrain was unique, making it easy to defend and difficult to attack. Fan Lingyue, who had long since woken up, had been waiting for an opportunity to take down this pass without shedding a drop of blood. The reason why she had been hiding was partly to show weakness to Dexia, and partly to wait for the Eternal Night Cult to make their move. The Eternal Night Cult and the Northern Ming Imperial Court were now in the same boat. Once the Northern Ming army was defeated, the Eternal Night Cult would have no choice but to bear the full fury of Dexia alone. Therefore, the Eternal Night Cult would definitely do anything to wake her up. In the Eternal Night Cult there were many miraculous doctors and elixirs, but there was only one thing that could definitely wake her up. The Divine Heaven Pill. Just like the Xiantian Pill in Dexia's Imperial City, the Divine Heaven Pill was a panacea that only the Eternal Night Cult had. It was even more precious than the Xiantian Pill. The Eternal Night Cult had a long history, and its foundation was beyond imagination. Even so, the number of Divine Heaven Pills they had could be counted with one hand. At this moment, she needed a Divine Heaven Pill to help her break through the impenetrable defense of Dexia's gate. The Eternal Night Cult did not disappoint her. They sent someone to deliver a Divine Heaven Pill, but the one who consumed it was not her, but Yang Hong. Yang Hong had followed her for 7 years. He had the right to take the Divine Heaven Pill, and he had to take it. Yang Hong had been stuck at the pinnacle of the 9th level for a long time. Originally, he was already showing signs of a breakthrough. All he needed was an opportunity. Now that he had taken the Divine Heaven Pill, he naturally succeeded in stepping into the Khanate stage. The 3 martial marquises of Grand Xia came at the right time. In order to deal the greatest amount of damage to Grand Xia, she asked Yang Hong to forcefully suppress the arrival of the Xiantian phenomenon. Although it couldn't last for long, it was still possible to do so for 7 days. There were no accidents in the plan. The 3 martial marquises of Dexia were rejected outside Heaven's Gate, and Dexia's strength was immediately reduced by nearly half. Now she only needed to completely destroy Dexia's resistance in the shortest amount of time, and the 1,000-year-old Dexia would not be far from destruction. The only unfortunate thing was that the internal strife in the Great Xia had been quelled by Emperor Xia while she was unconscious. Otherwise, the current situation would have been even more advantageous to her. Speaking of which, Ningqian had already ruined many of her plans. Fortunately, he was dead. Without this variable, she would have a lot less trouble in the future. Northern Ming Royal Court, Flat Moon Plains. Two figures walked one after the other, neither hurried nor slow. With the heavenly tomes, the heavenly lake, and the heaven reversal pill, do you still need this thing? Prince Yen walked to the front and asked indifferently. It's been a long time, and I've already gotten used to it. Furthermore, it would be a waste not to use this trump card. There's no need to rush it, Ningqian replied indifferently from his wheelchair. Scheming is just a small trick. Prince Yen frowned and reminded him. Ha! Ningqian laughed softly but didn't reply. He wasn't Prince Yen, and he wasn't strong enough to suppress everything. Scheming was still necessary. Senior, where are you going? Ningqian asked a moment later. I don't know. I'm just walking around, Prince Yen said calmly. Why don't we take a trip to the Northern Ming Royal Court's capital? Ningqian thought for a moment before suggesting. Sure, Prince Yen replied. After a simple discussion, the two of them changed directions and headed in the direction of the Northern Ming Royal Court's capital. The Northern Ming Royal Court's territory wasn't small. However, most of it was grasslands and deserts. In addition, the climate was cold and resources were scarce. This was why it was so poor. In the past 7 years under Fan Lingyue's governance, the Northern Ming Royal Court situation had gradually improved. However, it was still far inferior to the powerful and rich Great Xia. It was said that the Northern Ming Royal Court's capital was a city built in the desert. It had more than 1 million people, and it was the most prosperous and rich place in Northern Ming. On the way, Ningqian was a little worried as he asked softly, Senior, will Imperial Preceptor Golden Staff spread the news that I'm alive? No, that idiot doesn't even know me. How can he know you? Furthermore, although he's shameless, he cares a lot about his face. He definitely won't mention such an embarrassing matter to anyone, said Prince Yen with certainty. That's good. Ningqian nodded. He was prepared to give Fan Lingyue a surprise, so how could he expose it now? Senior, what realm are you at now? Ningqian asked the question he wanted to know the most. The peak of the 4th tribulation of the 5th tribulation realm, said Prince Yen honestly. Hearing this, Ningqian unconsciously smacked his lips. What a powerful realm. Senior was about to catch up to those 5 old monsters and become the 6th monster in the world. Compared to this Senior, he realized that any so-called genius or heavenly pride was laughable, let alone a martial trash like him. He was handsome, talented, and also good at fighting. Walking together with such a Senior really made him unhappy. He thought of Wild. In this world, only Wild would seriously and cutely say that he was good at fighting. Wild is very good. It's just that he's been restricted by the barbarian king, said Prince Yen. Ningqian's heart trembled. How did he know what he was thinking? This wasn't the first time. Could it be that there was still a mind-reading cultivation method in this world? Prince Yen didn't say anything else. He continued to walk forward step by step. He also didn't know what the current situation in the Great Xia was like. Ningqian was worried. Ever since the two of them had come to this godforsaken place, they hadn't encountered a single person in a long time. In fact, let alone a person, they hadn't even seen a ghost. Perhaps they would only be able to ask about the situation of the two dynasties once they reached the Northern Ming capital. Hopefully, the Great Xia hadn't been destroyed yet. It wasn't that he didn't have confidence in the Great Xia. It was just that Fan Lingyue was too scary. And since he hadn't died, it was very likely that Fan Lingyue wouldn't die either. How could a peak 9th grade martial artist be killed so easily? Fan Lingyue was too patient. She could use anything to scheme against him. If it wasn't for the heavenly book protecting him, he would have been killed before the gunpowder could explode. Of the 2 pages of the heavenly book, Fan Lingyue had shattered one, and the gunpowder had shattered the other. It was now hanging above his chi si in a mess. It looked like it would be very difficult to recover. After leaving Sword City, the Senior had already told him that the life scroll in his hand was a heavenly book. Moreover, it was the beginning of the heavenly book. At that time he was very surprised. Later on he didn't think much of it. Now, after being saved by the heavenly book, he realized that this thing could also be used as a bulletproof vest and shield. He hoped that all the heavenly books in the world would be in his hands. His hopes were plentiful, but reality was harsh. The senior also told him that 2 volumes of the heavenly tomes had already fallen into the hands of the Eternal Night cult. Therefore, before he could voice out his wish, it had already been shattered. He had a good memory. The Eternal Night cult not only had 2 heavenly books, they also had 2 innate stage martial artists. Although he had died so many times without dying, he believed that if he didn't have eyes and went to the Eternal Night cult to snatch the heavenly book, he would definitely be beaten to death. Just by looking at the Eternal Night cult's Son of God, one would know how terrifying the experts in the Eternal Night cult were. Ningqian and Prince Yan continued to travel north. Finally, 2 days later they encountered a very large tribe. The tribe was very lively, as if there was some important activity going on. Prince Yan wasn't very interested, but Ningqian was. He turned his wheelchair and went into the crowd. Anyway, the sword rack was still with him. Don't follow me if you dare. Disabled people would be taken care of no matter where they were. Ningqian sat in the wheelchair and cut through all obstacles. He was invincible. In a short while, he was at the front of the crowd. Prince Yan followed him unhurriedly. Wherever he passed, the crowd unconsciously opened up a gap for him. After he passed, they squeezed tightly again. In the open space in front of him, a group of young men were struggling to snatch an embroidered ball. Ningqian's eyelids twitched. He immediately knew what was going on. It was another one looking for a groom. Ningqian moved his wheelchair slightly to the back of the crowd, using half of Prince Yan's body to block it. What he was most afraid of now was a groom search. Northern Ming's culture was very open. The groom sat on a high platform. She looked a little shy. She was very fair and beautiful. She's a good match for the senior, Ningqian said secretly. This lady's dress showed that she wasn't an ordinary person. She must be the daughter of a high-ranking member of the tribe. The senior was so handsome, and the young lady was so beautiful. It could be said that they were a perfect match, a match made in heaven. While Ningqian was lost in his thoughts, the young men in the open space in the middle were about to go crazy. Whoever had the embroidered ball would have a bloody nose and a swollen face in the next moment. Punching and kicking was not allowed, but it couldn't stop someone from playing dirty. There were so many people, who could see clearly who was playing dirty? There was a time limit for the groom search. It was impossible to let this group of young men fight endlessly. Time passed little by little. It was about to end. The embroidered ball was still flying in the air. It flew here and there, and then it flew to Ningqian's side. Then it fell into Prince Yan's arms. Ningqian was stunned. The lady on the high platform smiled. The crowd was boiling. Chapter 83. Ningqian admitted that he was just letting his imagination run wild, but he didn't expect that his imagination would come true. However, after a short moment of surprise, Ningqian gradually calmed down. He knew that Prince Yan only cared about the sword, and he couldn't accept this girl. In the open space, the young men all looked unconvinced, but they didn't dare to act presumptuously here. On the high platform, the beautiful girl walked down shyly. She went forward and hung the red ribbon in her hand on the arm of the person she liked to show her feelings. The crowd immediately clapped. This was the most beautiful pearl of their tribe, and she deserved the warmest blessings. The show is over. Let's go, Prince Yan said indifferently, looking as calm as ever. He turned around without a trace of reluctance, as if what had just happened hadn't been reflected in his eyes at all. The red ribbon and the embroidered ball slid down and fell to the ground silently. They floated in the wind and rolled, but they still couldn't make the person turn around to look back. Ningqian sighed inwardly and also turned his wheelchair to leave. In this world, lovers couldn't always be together, let alone heartless people. Senior was a Xiantian, a diviner. He was a peerless genius who had entered the fourth tribulation of the Xiantian realm in less than 30 years of cultivation. How could he be tied down by worldly feelings? The beautiful girl was stunned. Looking at the red ribbon and the embroidered ball on the ground, she couldn't come back to her senses. Men, stop them. At this moment, an old man with a white beard walked out and said with a gloomy expression, "Yes, sir." As he spoke, more than 10 big and sturdy grassland men rushed out and quickly chased after the two. However, just as they were about to approach the two, they felt an irresistible force and were all sent flying. Warriors! The old man with the white beard narrowed his eyes. He knew that these two people weren't simple, but the Cho tribe's reputation couldn't be tarnished either. He couldn't just let this matter go. Ming Cheng, stop them! The old man with the white beard shouted with a serious expression. Yes, sir. Before he finished speaking, a man in black with a machete at his waist appeared. He stamped his feet and turned into a black shadow that swept towards the two. Clang! The sword and saber met, blocking the path of the black-clothed man. Ning Chun exerted force in his hand and pushed the former away. He frowned unconsciously. Seeing the scimitar in the black-clothed man's hand, he suddenly remembered that when Zhang Sun was attacked, the assassins had used scimitars like this. In this world, there were not many people who used scimitars, and the moon-shaped scimitar in the hands of the black-clothed man was even rarer. On the other side, the man in black moved again. His machete slashed across like a slanted moon, silently approaching. Bang! There was a loud collision, and the dust and sand around the two of them were thrown into a frenzy. However, there was a clear cracking sound, and a very obvious crack appeared on the wheels of the wheelchair. Ning Chun frowned again. He focused his left hand into a finger and aimed it at the man's chest. In the instant of contact, 70% of the force was withdrawn and 30% penetrated the man's body. The black-robed man let out a muffled groan and was sent flying. He retreated a few steps and then spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes withered. Senior, we won't be leaving for now, said Ning Chun. What's the matter? Prince Yen stopped and asked. Yes, Ning Chun nodded and answered. He wanted to confirm whether the assassins of Zhang Sun had anything to do with the black-clothed man in front of him. Moreover, his wheelchair was almost broken and needed to be repaired. The wheelchair that Mr. Liu of the academy had made for him had been destroyed in the explosion. The one he was sitting on was bought with Prince Yan's money from a merchant in northern Meng. Now it seemed that it was indeed very fragile. The wheelchair creaked. The two of them turned around and walked back to the white-bearded elder. Greetings, old sir. Ning Chun smiled brightly and bowed in greeting. Arrest them, the white-bearded elder shouted with a darkened face. More than 10 men struggled to get up from the ground and immediately surrounded the two of them. They looked fearful and did not dare to move forward. No need to arrest us. We won't resist, Ning Chun said with a smile. Yen you decide how to deal with them. The white-bearded elder looked at the woman not far away and said in a low voice. Take them back to the tent first, Pei Yen, who had been silent, said softly. Ning Chun and Prince Yen did not have any objections. They obediently followed the escorting men to the tent where they were locked up. Most of the tribes on the grassland lived a nomadic life. They lived in tents that could be easily moved. Ning Chun and Prince Yen entered. Looking at the furnishings, it did not look like a place for prisoners, but more like a place for guests. It seemed that the girl had a good heart. Even if she was angry, she would not go too far. Speaking of which, half of the fault this time was on them. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. They only followed the clothes of the Romans, but still could not accept other things. Why did you stay? Prince Yen walked to the table and poured himself a cup of tea. He asked calmly. I felt that the machete in the black-clothed man's hand was very similar to the weapons used by those who assassinated the Empress, Ning Chun answered seriously. At that time he had suspected many people, including the royal court of northern Meng, the Eternal Night sect, and the one in the West Palace. Now it seemed that it was the people of northern Meng who did it. Since it was done by the royal court of northern Meng, it must have something to do with Fan Lingyue. Can you confirm it? Prince Yen asked with a trace of coldness in his eyes. The possibility is very high. That's why I asked to stay. Ning Chun nodded. His expression was also very ugly. During that assassination, if Qing Ning had not risked her life to protect them, he and Zhang Sun would not have been able to escape. Thinking about it now, he still shuddered. Don't hurt them by mistake and don't let them go by mistake, Prince Yen said calmly. Understood, Ning Chun replied. Outside the tent, the white-bearded elder looked at the black-clothed man beside him and said in a heavy tone, Ming Cheng, Can you tell where they came from? I can't, but the young man in the wheelchair is very powerful. I am not his opponent. As for the man in green, I can't feel the aura of a warrior. He should be just an ordinary person. Ming Chang expressed his opinion. Could they be from Xia? The white-bearded elder asked. We can only know after testing them. Ming Chang thought for a while and said, but they shouldn't have any bad intentions. If the young man didn't hold back just now, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to stand here. The white-bearded elder nodded and said, it's better to be careful. Although the Pei tribe does not agree with the war between the two dynasties, Northern Meng and Xia have already started fighting. We can't be the ones who invite the wolf into the house. Yes, Ming Chang nodded and replied. Inside and outside the tent, everyone had their own schemes. However, the person who should be paid the most attention was ignored by the four of them. Why was it so easy to forget a woman's happiness? Pei Yan fell in love with the man in green at first sight. Especially the tranquil and calm aura on him, it made her feel an unprecedented peace. Grandpa, Pei Yan walked over and respectfully greeted the white-bearded elder in front of the tent. Yan, have you taken your medicine? The white-bearded elder asked with concern. His granddaughter had been suffering from heartache since she was young. She had to take medicine every day to ensure that it would not relapse. I've taken it, Pei Yan replied with a gentle smile on her face. Where's third brother? Pei Yan looked around and found that Ming Chang was nowhere to be seen. She could not help but ask. In the tent. The white-bearded elder turned his head and glanced at her. In the tent, Ming Chang, who just walked in, looked at the young man in the wheelchair, and the man in green who was drinking tea quietly beside the table. He felt strange. No matter how he looked at it, the man in green who did not have any chi of a cultivator was the one in charge. As for the young man, he seemed more like a junior. He was not a cultivator, but he could still maintain the appearance of a man in his 20s. No matter how he looked at it, it was a little strange. May I know how I should address you? Ming Chang lowered his attitude and asked politely. Ning Fan, this is an elder in my family. He doesn't like to talk to others. So, I won't introduce him. Ning Chan replied with a bright smile. I'm Pei Ming Chang. Thank you for showing mercy, Brother Ning. Ming Chang bowed respectfully and thanked him. Brother Pei, you're too courteous. We were also in the wrong earlier. I hope Brother Pei won't blame us for being rude. Ning Chan sighed softly and said, it's not appropriate for me to ask about my sister's matter. I can only wait for Yan to make the decision herself. It's not that the Pei family is deliberately making things difficult for her. It's just that the matter of choosing a groom is an extremely serious matter in our tribe. Brother Ning's attitude just now really made my sister feel a little embarrassed. Ming Chang explained the seriousness of the matter. It was the custom of the Pei family for the past thousands of years. The people of the grassland were not so cunning. The men would snatch the embroidered ball, and the women would only wear the red ribbon if they were willing. Both parties were willing. Today's situation had never happened before. Yan was the granddaughter of the patriarch and also the pearl of the entire tribe. Her reputation was extremely important. Today's matter was indeed the fault of the two men in front of him. Hearing this, Ning Chan glanced at Prince Yan, who was still calmly drinking his tea. He suddenly felt a headache coming on. Senior, can you say something? Brother Pei, we really didn't consider this matter properly. We're new here and aren't familiar with the customs. I hope Brother Pei can give us a solution. While speaking, Ning Chan poured himself a cup of tea. Why should he be thirsty when his senior was drinking tea? Ming Chang thought for a moment and said, let your senior marry Yan. Cough cough. Hearing this, Ning Chan spat out his tea and coughed non-stop. His face turned red from choking. This matter was very unreliable. He should think of a way to get some information and then send a message. Cough cough, Brother Pei, although the seniors in my family haven't gotten married yet, marriage is still a big matter for two people. Your Miss Yan and my senior both need to think about it carefully. There's no rush. Ning Chen's head hurt. What should he do? If it was a matter between men, he could just send a message if he couldn't think of a solution. But now that it involved a pure and innocent girl, his intelligence was not enough. Should he write a letter to Zhang Sun and ask? This thought suddenly flashed through Ning Chen's mind. Immediately, he shivered and immediately dismissed this suicidal thought. Chapter 84. Ningchun admitted that he was a very dangerous person. He would never provoke people he couldn't afford to offend. For example, Zhang Sun and Zhang Sun. Everything in the world had its weakness. Even if he reached the Xiantian realm, he still wouldn't dare to be arrogant in front of Zhang Sun. Moreover, he was still far away from the Xiantian realm. After recovering his cultivation, his confidence had increased a lot, but it also depended on who he was facing. He couldn't beat Zhang Sun, and he couldn't afford to offend him. In the end, he could only bully outsiders with his 7th grade cultivation. Ming Chang could tell that Ningchun was stalling, but he didn't point it out. He also needed time to test their background. Yan Er's marriage wasn't a small matter. How could it be decided just like that? Brother Ning, may I know why you came to the Pei clan? If there's anything you need help with, just tell me. Ming Chang asked casually as if nothing had happened. We're just passing by. It's nothing. Ningchun replied with a smile. Where are you going, Brother Ning? Ming Chang continued to ask. The capital, Ningchun said honestly. I've long heard that the capital of Northern Meng is a miracle in the desert. I've always admired it, but I've never had the chance to see it. This time, I came with the elders of my family to see it. Brother Ning, are you not from Northern Meng? Ming Chang asked in surprise. Heh. Ningchun smiled and shook his head, saying, An country is a small country. It's not worthy of Brother Pei's attention. Ming Chang frowned, but he didn't ask anymore. He had never heard of an country, but in this world there were countless big and small countries. If he continued to ask, it would be rude. Brother Ning, have a good rest. I won't disturb you. I'll take my leave first. Ming Chang cupped his fists and said politely. Ningchun also cupped his fists and said sincerely with a smile, Brother Pei's saber technique is good. If there's time, I must ask for your advice again. Anytime. Ming Chang replied. After Ming Chang left, Yan Imperial Prince drank the tea in his cup and said calmly, You're quite patient. Ningchun chuckled and said, I've just arrived here. How can I ask for information so quickly? It's better to leave an honest impression. However, this Pei Ming Chang was a little impatient. He asked too many things he shouldn't have asked. Not everyone can be as scheming as you, Prince Yan said calmly. Ningchun was speechless. He was forced to do this. He also wanted to be pure, but how could he be pure? The world was so chaotic, and people's hearts were so unpredictable. If he didn't learn to hide a knife behind a smile, others would stab him in the back first. Is there really such a place as an country? Prince Yan asked casually. Who knows? The world is so big and there are so many countries. Who knows? Ningchun replied indifferently. Heh. Prince Yan chuckled. Indeed, he was full of nonsense. He wondered how Wuyo had brought this brat back to the Weiyang Palace. Senior, how should we deal with that lady? Ningchun was put in a difficult position. This was the most important thing right now, and everything else was still manageable. It's up to you. You're the one who wants to watch the show, and you're the one who wants to stay. Naturally, you'll be the one to resolve this matter. It was rare for Prince Yan to say more, and push all the responsibility to the younger generation. Hearing this, Ningchun was furious. This matter couldn't be settled like this. Who was the one who took the embroidered ball? Who was the red ribbon for? So what if they were Xiantian? So what if they were legend? Could Xiantian and legend casually make things difficult for the younger generation? Senior, you're shirking responsibility, Ningchun argued, unwilling to take the blame just like that. So what if I am? Prince Yan replied calmly. Ningchun was dumbfounded. This was too arrogant. How could he be like this? He thought of a saying from his previous life. Only a strong country could have diplomacy. Senior had demonstrated this point incisively and vividly. So what if he was? Such a domineering and arrogant statement. What could he do? He didn't dare to do anything. Senior, you win. Ningchun clenched his teeth and complimented him. Heh. Prince Yan didn't care. He continued to drink the tea in his cup calmly. The tent quieted down. Ningchun calmed down and thought about how to solve the problem in front of him. First, there was the trouble of Senior, and second, there was the assassination of Zhang Sun. He wasn't good at Senior's matter, but Zhang Sun's matter shouldn't be difficult to investigate. There weren't many people in the entire northern Ming imperial court who used this kind of scimitar. They might even be from the same faction. He only needed to know some clues and he could follow them until he found the final target. He had Prince Yan, a nuclear weapon, by his side. No matter how strong the faction was, they could be chopped up like vegetables. Just as the two of them were thinking, a beautiful woman opened the tent flap and walked in. Ningchen felt a headache coming. He looked at the woman and then at Prince Yan. In the end, he decided not to be a third wheel and leave enough space for the two of them to talk. You guys talk. I'm a little hungry. I'm going to eat something. Before he finished speaking, Ningchen hurriedly turned his wheelchair and slipped out of the tent. At this moment he had the urge to stand up and run. Bring some back for me too, Prince Yan said calmly. Ningchen staggered and almost fell down. He quickly stabilized himself and gritted his teeth. Definitely. The tent flap fell. Ningchen wiped his cold sweat and looked at the blue sky and white clouds outside. He was in a good mood. In his eyes, other than that uncute Fan Lingyue, the rest of the people in the northern Ming imperial court were still very cute. The herdsmen were already busy with their livelihood at the beginning of the year. After winter and spring came, there were already patches of green on the grassland. Although it was still not enough to herd horses and sheep, it was not as desolate as before. Night was coming. The people in the tribe were preparing dinner. They were killing sheep and starting fires. People came and went in front of every tent. It was very lively. Ningchen was so envious that his heart itched. He turned his wheelchair and went over, wanting to get familiar with them. However, he was mercilessly given a cold shoulder by the men of the grassland. They knew this young man. He had just offended the most beautiful pearl in their tribe. He was a very bad person. No one in the world knew how thick-skinned Ningchen was. Even if others ignored him, he would still approach them with a smile on his face. He would help with fetching water and helping with the fire. In short, no matter how strong the enemy was, he wanted to be as pleasant as the spring breeze. The maidens and aunts of the grassland quickly accepted this diligent, laughing and kind-hearted young man. The men of the grassland forced their wives and mothers to gradually change their attitudes. Little brother Ning, you don't know. At that time, that wild wolf was less than a zhang away from me. Its eyes were wide open like lanterns, but I was not afraid. I threw myself at it and killed it with a few punches and kicks. In front of the bonfire a man was bragging. Big brother Ahu, you're so awesome. Next to him, Ning Chen's face revealed a look of worship as he complimented. Little brother Ning, don't listen to his nonsense. At that time he was so scared that he couldn't even walk. It was the tribe's divine archer, Ah Shui, who shot an arrow through the wild wolf's eye and saved him. At this time, Ahu's wife came over to deliver the mutton and ruthlessly undermined him. Ha! Ahu scratched his head in embarrassment and argued with a lack of confidence. In the end it was me who killed it. It would have died even if you didn't kill it. Ahu's wife replied. Big brother Ahu is still very awesome. The first time I met a wild wolf, I was so scared that I almost peed in my pants. Ningchen promptly saved the situation. Oh, little brother Ning has also met a wild wolf? Sure enough, Ahu's attention was attracted and he asked curiously. Yes. At that time, little brother's legs weren't crippled and I hadn't practiced martial arts. After I saw a wild wolf, I was so scared that my face turned white. Even after the wild wolf died, I was still vomiting. Ningchen said with a bashful face. Haha. Ahu laughed heartily. He felt that this little brother was very much to his liking. He was honest, simple and honest, and he was also very down to earth. Ahu's wife also smiled with good intentions. The people of the prairie were all afraid of meeting a wild wolf. One or two was still okay, but a pack was a bit scary. Being scared by a wild wolf wasn't a shameful thing. Big brother Ahu, is there anyone in the tribe who can do carpentry? Little brother's wheelchair is a bit broken. I need to find someone to fix it. While speaking, Ning Chen's face flashed with a touch of embarrassment as he asked in a low voice. Hearing this, Ahu and Ahu's wife both laughed. Just find your big brother Ahu. He's the person who's the best at carpentry in the tribe. Ahu's wife laughed. Ningchen was startled. He turned his gaze towards Ahu and saw Ahu proudly nodding his head. He was surprised in his heart. He didn't expect that this simple and honest man actually had some skill. You can't judge a book by its cover. Who said Zhang Fei didn't know how to embroider? This big and rough man could actually do fine carpentry. Big brother Ahu, then I'll leave it to you. Ningchen politely saluted and said. Little brother Ning is too polite. Ahu laughed and casually said. While the two people were chatting, the bonfire crackled and popped. The aroma of mutton also began to gradually spread. Ningchen's gaze also moved to the mutton on the bonfire. His mouth was drooling. Mutton with his hands. He wanted to taste it in his previous life, but unfortunately he never had the chance. Come little brother Ning. I'll give you a leg of mutton. Ahu's wife was a relatively careful person. She saw Ningchen's greedy look at a glance and handed over the leg of mutton that was roasted first. Then I won't be polite. Ningchen's face was smiling like a blooming flower. He took the leg of mutton and ate it happily without fearing that it was hot. Your elder won't come out to eat? Ahu asked strangely. He's not hungry. Ningchen was busy eating the meat. He didn't have time to explain. He directly solved the problem with 3 words and then continued to wolf down the meat. Oh, Ahu didn't doubt him. He used a knife to cut a piece of roasted meat and handed it to his wife. He also began to eat in big mouthfuls. The 3 of them sat around the bonfire. Ahu's wife, Ahu, and Ningchen slowly ate the meat in big mouthfuls. After a while, only the bones of the half of the goat were left. Ahu's wife ate a little, Ahu ate a leg, and Ningchen ate the rest. After eating, Ningchen thanked the enthusiastic Ahu and his wife and prepared to return to the tent. As he walked, he felt that he had forgotten something. He thought for a while but couldn't remember it. Since he couldn't remember it, it shouldn't be important. Who cares? Chapter 85. Early in the morning, the sun was shining brightly. In the open space in front of the tribe, the sound of swords clashing could be heard, attracting many people to come and watch. In the field, the people fighting were Ningchen and Mingcheng. The ink sword danced in the sunlight, blocking every angle of the scimitar. Ningchen suppressed his cultivation to the same 6th grade as Mingcheng, but he still had an overwhelming advantage. Prince Yan was also watching from the side. He was not surprised by this result. Although Ningchen had not been practicing martial arts for a long time, the number of battles he had fought was not less than anyone else. Most of his opponents were people with higher cultivation than him. In terms of battle experience, he was already very rich. In a martial arts competition, there was nothing more than cultivation, foundation, and moves. Other than that, experience was the most decisive factor. In the middle of the battle, something unexpected happened. The moment the sword and the blade clashed again, there was a crisp sound. In the next moment, the wheelchair under Ningchen shattered and flew in all directions. Ningchen frowned at this sudden situation. His ink sword was on the ground, and he turned his right hand, flying backwards. In the next moment, the scimitar came towards him. It was as cold as the moon and as fast as lightning. Facing the unavoidable blade light, Ningchen's left hand clenched his fingers. With a clang, he caught the scimitar. Taking advantage of the momentum, he let go of the scimitar and pointed his sword finger at Mingcheng's shoulder. Ningchen's finger strength penetrated his body. After succeeding in one move, he did not continue to attack. His right hand patted the hilt of his ink sword, and he immediately retreated from the battle. At the same time, Prince Yan waved his hand, and a chair flew out of the tent, landing right where Ningchen had landed. This move was done so casually that no one noticed it. No one would think that this young man without any martial arts aura was actually one of the most terrifying Xiantian masters in the world. In the field, the scimitar in Mingcheng's hand had already fallen to the ground. The numbness in his shoulder did not dissipate for a long time, and he could not even lift it up. Brother Ning's swordsmanship is brilliant. I am ashamed of my inferiority. Mingcheng was not a petty person. A loss was a loss. His left hand gradually raised the scimitar, and he admitted defeat seriously. Brother Pei, you're too courteous. Ning Chun sat down in his chair. With a wave of his hand, the ink sword and scabbard flew back to him. With a clang, the ink sword returned to its scabbard and stabbed into the ground. I've seen Brother Pei's saber technique. Although it's as swift and fierce as lightning, it's mostly just for show. It doesn't seem like an orthodox martial art. Ning Chun frowned and pretended to feel that it was a pity. That's impossible. The Qing clan's saber techniques are the most orthodox martial arts of Beimeng. How can it be just for show? As expected, Ming Cheng fell for the trick and immediately denied it. Sigh, at this moment, Ning Chun and Prince Yin sighed in their hearts. Too inexperienced. I lost because my skills were not good enough. Brother Ning, please don't slander the Qing family's saber technique. Ming Cheng did not know that there was a trap and continued to speak with a solemn expression. Brother Pei, please don't blame me. I was rude. Ning Chun bowed and apologized. His attitude couldn't be more proper. Seeing Ning Chen's sincere tone of apology, Ming Cheng's expression became a little better. He no longer cared about the former's rude words. After the fight and the show, the crowd applauded cooperatively and then dispersed. Everyone went back to their own homes and did their own things. Brother Ahu, don't forget my wheelchair. Ning Chun couldn't move. He could only sit on the chair and shout at Ahu, who was far away. I know. Ahu also replied in a loud voice. For the whole morning, Ning Chun sat in the open space outside in a daze. He couldn't go anywhere. The beautiful grassland scenery made him want to vomit. Do you want to get up and take a walk? Prince Yin walked over and asked lightly. No, you do your thing. Ning Chun refused without hesitation. Then you continue. Prince Yin turned and walked towards the tent. Senior, what did you say to that girl yesterday? Ning Chun couldn't suppress the fire of gossip in his heart. He couldn't help but shout at the former's back. When he went back to the tent last night, he happened to see Pei Yan walk out with red eyes. This made him very curious. He thought about it until midnight and almost couldn't sleep. I didn't say a word. Prince Yin replied without turning his head. Ning Chun was stunned. Then he couldn't help but say, damn. No wonder the girl almost cried. He originally wanted to leave some space for the two of them. Why didn't the senior reject him tactfully? If not, he could have rejected him directly. Yesterday, he found out from Ahu that this Pei Yan's identity was not ordinary. Her grandfather was the leader of the Pei tribe, which was the overall boss of this area. He was very powerful. He had a good impression of this girl. She was a little weak and seemed a little sentimental. However, she was still a kind and good girl. Such a gentle girl was more like a lady from a noble family in the Central Plains than a girl from the grassland. He also heard that this Pei Yan was proficient in zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. She liked the culture of Great Xia very much. He also heard that this Pei Yan had a heartache disease. She was like the original version of Lin Daiyu. He also heard that this Pei Yan's mother died right after giving birth to Pei Yan because of heartache. He also heard that this Pei Yan might not live past 25 years old. Moreover, more than one doctor said so. The more Ning Chun thought about it, the more indignant he felt. Yesterday afternoon, he had painstakingly collected information outside. He had even sacrificed his face and wanted to find out Pei Yan's birth characters. However, this senior of his just stayed in the tent and drank tea for half a day. At this moment, a little girl's voice sounded in the grassland. Her tone was anxious, and it immediately attracted the attention of many people. Miss has fainted. As soon as she finished speaking, the white-bearded elder in the tent not far away immediately walked out with a gloomy expression. He quickly walked towards Pei Yan's tent. Following behind him were the doctors from Ming City, the grassland, and a large group of people. Ning Chun thought hard. A heartache disease should be a heart disease in his world. Furthermore, this girl was born with it. The possibility of her being cured was really negligible. The caltrop crystal flower had a miraculous effect on heart meridian injuries. Unfortunately, he didn't have it. As for whether he would take out the caltrop crystal flower if he had it, only the heavens knew. There were no assumptions in this world. Therefore, this girl was probably incurable. Although it was cruel, this was the reality. Inside Pei Yan's tent, the doctor was checking her pulse. His expression became more and more serious, indicating that the situation was not optimistic. How is Yen Air? The white-bearded elder asked anxiously. Patriarch, I've already tried my best. The doctor sighed softly and continued. Mrs. Body was already extremely weak. Before this, I suggested to chase away the bad luck for her because I wanted to see if a miracle would happen. Now it's no longer necessary. How could it be? The white-bearded elder staggered and his face turned pale. Yen Air hasn't gotten married yet. How can she just leave like this? Chase away the bad luck. Yes, chase away the bad luck. At this moment, this was the only thought in the white-bearded elder's mind. He could not care less about other things. He immediately calmed himself down and ordered. Men. Yes. A few men walked into the tent. Go and bring Mrs. Wedding Dress here. Tonight, Miss will get married. Also, take care of those two people. Yes. The men accepted the order and left. At the side, Ming Cheng's face showed a hint of worry. Patriarch, isn't it a little inappropriate to do this? That young man called Ning Fan is very strong. It's better not to offend him. We can't care so much. Yen Air's matter is the most important. The white-bearded elder said in a deep voice. Ning Chan, who was outside the tent, had no idea about what was happening inside. At this moment he was still waiting for his wheelchair to be ready. The sun rose from the east to the south and then to the west. Ning Chan was sitting there. Just as he was about to go crazy from boredom, he suddenly realized that the atmosphere in the tribe had gradually become a little unusual. A few young ladies from the grassland were walking around with all kinds of things in their hands. There were even red candles and red paper that were only used during festivals and weddings. Ning Chun did not take it seriously at first. Later he felt that something was wrong. A thought flashed through his mind and he could not help but open his mouth wide. Forced marriage? It can't be, right? The matter had become big. Ning Chun had a headache. The Yen Prince of Great Xia was actually forced to get married. Who would believe this? Little brother Ning, your wheelchair is ready. Just as Ning Chan was having a headache, he suddenly heard Ahu's loud voice coming from not far away. He could not help but be overjoyed. Now he could quickly run away. However, when he saw the wheelchair he almost cried. He was wrong. He should not have believed that Zhang Fei could embroider. How was this a wheelchair? This was clearly a chair with wheels. Big brother Ahu, thank you. Ning Chan gritted his teeth and thanked him. Little brother Ning is too polite. Ahu was a careless person. He very happily accepted Ning Chen's thanks. Ning Chen sat on it. He felt that it would not fall apart in a short period of time. Only then did he feel slightly relieved. He would make do with it. He would buy another one in the royal city of the Northern Meng Imperial Court. Big brother Ahu, what are they doing? Ning Chan pointed at the young ladies from the grassland who were busying themselves and asked in a low voice. Ahu looked around and immediately lowered his head. He said in a low voice, I'll tell you. Don't tell anyone that I told you. Of course. Ning Chan nodded his head like a chick pecking at rice. I heard from my wife that Miss Pei Yan is seriously ill. The clan leader is going to drive away the bad luck for Miss tonight, Ahu said in a low voice. Fuck, is that true? Don't fool me. Ning Chan pretended to be surprised. How can it be fake? It's absolutely true. Ahu patted his chest and almost swore. Big brother Ahu, you can go back first. I definitely won't say that you told me. Ning Chan said gratefully. Ahu left in satisfaction. Ning Chan immediately turned his wheelchair and came to Prince Yan's tent. The first thing he said when he came in was, Senior, Ahu said that you are going to be forced to marry. Should we run? In the tent, Prince Yan glanced at Ning Chan indifferently and said, This is the solution you have been thinking about for the whole day? Ning Chan was a little ashamed, but after thinking about it, he felt that it was not right. Why should he be ashamed? He was not the one who caused this. Hurry up, surround the tent. Don't let them run away. At this time, the unique rough voice of a man from the grassland sounded from outside. Immediately, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard. There were at least 100 people. All right, it's too late to run now. Ning Chan sighed helplessly. He was very unhappy. Why did he have to fight all day long? Chapter 86. The curtain of the tent was lifted, and a few burly men walked in. They looked murderous and unfriendly. The men of the grassland had seen blood before. Once they were serious, they would exude an oppressive aura that was different from ordinary people. However, this was only for ordinary people. The two people in the tent could not be said to be murderous, but they were the kind of extraordinary people who would not even blink when killing. Ning Chan turned the wheelchair around and stabbed the black sword into the ground. He did not hide his displeasure. You want to fight? Who's afraid of who? The white-bearded old man walked in, Ming Chang walked in, and even the doctor came in. Seeing the calm young man in green, they frowned. Take him away, the white-bearded old man shouted. Yes. The 7 burly men went around the wheelchair and directly grabbed the young man in green. Ning Chen's displeasure grew. Did they think he was invisible? He patted the black sword with his right hand, and a wave of true essence spread out. The burly men were forced to take a few steps back. Let's talk nicely. Ning Chan was guilty, and he did not want to make things worse. He suppressed his temper and said, Ming Chang, you hold him back, the white-bearded old man shouted. Yes. Ming Chang helplessly pulled out the scimitar at his waist and took 2 steps forward. He said to Ning Chan, Brother Ning, sorry for the offense. Ning Chen's expression gradually turned cold. He gave him face, but he did not want it. Clang, the black sword was unsheathed. Frost condensed on the sword and snowflakes surged. The temperature in the tent dropped. The tense atmosphere spread, and a fight was about to break out. At this moment, Yanqing Prince, who had been silent all this time, spoke. Okay. Put your sword away. Yanqing Prince walked out of the tent and said lightly, Go and see what's going on. Okay. Ning Chan narrowed his eyes, put his sword back into the scabbard and followed him out. When the two of them walked out, Ming Chang broke out in a cold sweat. They had underestimated the young man in the wheelchair. Even if there were 10 more of them, they would not be able to stop him, let alone him. Patriarch, we can't use force. Ming Chang advised again. The white-bearded old man snorted coldly, then turned and walked out of the tent. In Pei Yan's tent, Ning Chan and Yanqing Prince looked at the beautiful girl lying on the bed and got the truth from the doctor. Senior, is there any way to save him? Ning Chan asked via voice transmission. Caltrip flower. Prince Yen said calmly. So there's no hope? Ning Chan asked in a low voice. With your blood and my help, I can extend her lifespan by 3 years. Like I said before, you can do whatever you want with her. Yen Wang said calmly. We'll do our best. Ning Chan nodded and made a prompt decision. After he finished speaking, Ning Chan turned around and looked at the white-bearded old man who had just entered. He said, We can extend Miss Pei Yan's lifespan by 3 years. As a trade, all the enmity from before will be forgotten. The white-bearded old man was stunned, and so was everyone else. Ning Chan didn't urge him, but waited patiently and coldly. The worry of the people present was in stark contrast to the calmness of the two. Zhang Xuan's words that day were vividly reflected at this moment. Ning Chan was the most heartless person in the world. If it weren't for the fact that they were the ones in the wrong, who lived and who died would have nothing to do with him. She wasn't a man. Are you confident? The white-bearded old man asked with a trace of distrust in his eyes. It's up to you to believe it or not, Ning Chan said indifferently. The white-bearded old man's expression changed again and again. A moment later, he clenched his teeth and said, Fine, I agree. You can all leave. Yen Wang stepped forward and arrived in front of the bed. The white-bearded old man and everyone else hesitated, but they still couldn't decide. It's not too late to back out now. Ning Chan also turned his wheelchair and arrived in front of the bed. Get out. The white-bearded old man finally made up his mind. He drove everyone out of the tent and then followed them out. Poor parents. Ning Chan sighed softly. Then he used his sword finger to cut his arm. Drops of blood flowed down his arm and dripped onto Pei Yan's chest. He had the heaven-reversing pill in his body, and he had also soaked in Northern Meng's heavenly lake. It could be said that he was a living primer. At the same time, Yen Wang turned his palm and condensed qi. Xiantian power wrapped around the dripping blood and quickly entered Pei Yan's heart meridian. In an instant, the medicinal power spread and began to nourish Pei Yan's extremely weak heart. After about 10 breaths, Yin Wang stopped. Ningchen wiped his hand and a silver light flashed, stopping the blood on his arm. Then he looked at Pei Yin on the bed and waited for her to wake up. After half an hour, Pei Yin woke up. She looked at the young man in green in front of her and said weakly, "Can you tell me your true identity?" "Great Xia Yin Wang said lightly. Pei Yin was stunned. Then she closed her eyes weakly. A drop of tear fell silently. "Thank you." Ningchen and Yin Wang went out. The white-bearded old man immediately entered the tent. When he saw Pei Yin waking up on the bed, he couldn't help but cry with joy. "Let them go." The old man's voice came from the tent. Ming Chang and the others heard it and automatically made a path for the two of them to leave. "Let's go." Yin Wang walked in front, his green robe fluttering in the wind. "Okay." Ningchen responded and followed him. The two of them left unhurriedly without any reluctance. No matter how beautiful the grassland was, they were just passers-by. It was enough that they had seen it. The mountains have no foundation, the waters have no foundation, the grass is desolate, the clouds are faint, the willows are green, the cuckoo is unbearable to hear. On the grassland there was a voice saying goodbye. Ningchen turned around and saw a woman in a red wedding dress sitting in front of the tent. She was holding a pipa in her arms. Her face was pale and her red lips were red like blood. She was like a rose blooming in the cold wind. She was so beautiful that people didn't dare to look at her directly. What a pity. Ningchen sighed softly but didn't say anything. Then he turned around and continued walking forward. Yin Wang's expression was still as calm as ever. There was no fluctuation in his expression. He walked step by step without any hesitation. The grassland was very big. The two of them walked all the way north without stopping until they reached their destination, the capital of northern Meng. This was a city in the desert. From afar, it looked like a holy city floating on a yellow sea. It was very shocking. After the two of them entered the capital, they found that the lives of the people here were very different from the grassland outside. They were somewhat similar to the people of the Central Plains. They did all kinds of small businesses. They worked from dawn to dusk. Ningchen glanced at the majestic palace building in the distance and sneered. It was said that after the death of the northern Ming emperor, the palace was in chaos and several princes fought for the throne. It was also at this time that Fan Lingyue appeared out of nowhere and swept away all resistance. He helped the previous emperor's infant son to the throne and ended the internal strife in the northern Ming Empire. This meant that the emperor of northern Ming was only 7 years old this year. Northern Ming's sandsword is about to appear. I want to go take a look. Let's part here. Yin Wang's eyes flashed. Hearing this, Ningchen was startled. Then he nodded. Since Senior didn't let him go, it meant that he wasn't strong enough. It might be dangerous if he went. "How do I contact you?" Ningchen asked. "No need. I will look for you." Before he finished speaking, Yin Wang's figure had already disappeared. He was rushing towards the north. Ningchen opened his mouth and finally shook his head helplessly. He was hoping that Yin Wang could do this with him. Now it seemed that he had to rely on himself. It was a little difficult, but he couldn't keep waiting. The situation of Great Xia was already very dangerous. Zhang Sun was still having a headache. He had to do something. When he had just entered the capital, he had already inquired about the current situation of the war between the two dynasties. The Great Xia's Heaven's Gate had actually been broken through by Fan Lingyue, and Northern Meng's army of 300,000 marched straight in, even blocking the 3 martial marquises of the Great Xia outside the pass. This was the worst news. Since the war between the two dynasties, Great Xia's losses had reached a terrifying number. However, Northern Meng's army was almost unharmed. Beijiang Plains and Yingguei City's 200,000 soldiers, Zhuoqiushang's 350,000 soldiers, and the 300,000 soldiers in the hands of the 3 marquises were no longer a threat. Great Xia's 850,000 soldiers couldn't stop Northern Meng's 300,000 soldiers. The biggest difference was that Northern Meng had Fan Lingyue, but Great Xia didn't. This was a woman who could single-handedly create an era. She was already invincible. Ningchen didn't want Fan Lingyue to know that he was still alive, because he didn't want to confront her directly. He was also full of fear for such a woman. Ever since he came to this world, he had suffered a few big losses and even suffered serious injuries. Fan Lingyue was behind all of them. She wanted to kill him and he wanted to kill her. It was so simple that he could ignore everything. The Qing clan was a pawn that could be used. Based on the scimitar in Ming Cheng's hand, he could basically conclude that the group that assassinated Zhang Sun back then was from the Qing clan. Then he could also conclude that the Qing clan was also a hidden pawn of Fan Lingyue. He wanted to go in and see what kind of place the Qing clan was. The Qing clan was in northern Ming's capital. In this imperial land where there were as many aristocratic families as there were dogs and nobles everywhere, it wasn't very eye-catching. However, the Qing clan was different from other aristocratic families and nobles. The Qing clan wasn't really a clan with a single surname. There were very few direct descendants of the Qing clan, and they weren't allowed to marry outside, causing the number of descendants to dwindle. In a situation where they had no choice, the Qing clan set a rule that those who made great contributions to the Qing clan could be bestowed with the surname Qing. Regarding the traditions and rules of the Qing clan, Ningqian only had one word to say. Pooh. Incestuous marriage, I won't kill you all. However, this also gave him a lot of convenience. For the continuation of the bloodline, the Qing clan didn't reject any true experts. In the future, as long as they made enough contributions, they could be bestowed with the surname. He didn't have the slightest interest in this surname. Moreover, he went in to stab a knife. The Qing clan was very big, so big that it was shocking. Ningqian entered the Qing clan in a very high-profile and arrogant manner. He directly fought his way in. His cultivation of 7th grade immediately attracted the attention of the higher-ups of the Qing clan. A 7th grade martial artist under the age of 20 was really rare. This young master is here to be a guest elder. Call someone who can talk. Ningqian held a broken iron sword in his hand and stabbed it into the ground. He spoke arrogantly to a group of people who had fallen in front of him. Chapter 87. Ningqian did not use the ink sword because he did not want people to recognize him. As for his appearance with the beard and scars, who would recognize him? He was not Panin, who was unforgettable. Moreover, everyone in the world knew that he was already dead. If there were still people who linked him to Panin, he would really have nothing to say. Soon the butler of the Qing family walked out. When he saw Ningqian with a ferocious face and an unshaven beard, he could not help but frown. Such an ugly person. May I ask your name? The butler asked politely. Jade-faced gentleman by Yutong. Ningqian raised his head and said arrogantly. The wriggling scar on his face made him look somewhat scary and disgusting. Brother Bai, why have you come to the Qing mansion? The butler held back his disgust and continued to ask. Didn't I say it? I am here to be an honored guest. Ningqian did not see his face and continued to do whatever he wanted. He said arrogantly with his nose up in the air. After some thought, Ningqian added, I am also here to marry that little girl, Qing Wushuang. He knew that the Qing family had a missy named Qing Wushuang. At that time he was puzzled about how there were so many thick-skinned people in the world. The Qin family of Wushuang City had Qin Wushuang, and the Qing family of Beimeng had Qing Wushuang. However, as soon as Ningqian finished speaking, a clear and cold voice resounded from within the estate. Men, throw him out. While the voice was speaking, a girl with a cold expression walked out. When she saw the ugly man in the yard, her beautiful eyes revealed a strong sense of disgust. You are Qing Wushuang? Ningqian said with surprise. Only, this surprised expression appeared too ferocious when paired with the scar on his face. Missy. Before the butler of the Qing family could persuade her, 9 men dressed in black had already walked out and surrounded Ningqian. Come. I have been itching for a fight recently. Little girl, I will teach you a lesson after I take care of these bastards. Ningqian pulled out the broken iron sword from the ground, turned his wheelchair and walked 2 steps forward. Fortunately, he had bought a sturdy wheelchair as soon as he had entered the city, or else he would not be able to fight today with that thing made by Ahu. The sword was a broken sword. As soon as Ningqian injected a strand of true qi into it, he felt that the sword showed signs of cracking. He hurriedly withdrew his true qi and wrapped it around the sword. Ning Chen's arrogance infuriated everyone present. The 9 men in black attacked with machetes in their hands. Their machetes were ruthless, and every strike was aimed at the vital points. Qin Wushuang's cold face did not show any trace of pity. It was already unforgivable for this person to trespass into the love mansion, yet he still dared to speak rudely. He must be tired of living. The 9 of them worked together and unleashed a chain of attacks. Each attack was fiercer and more dangerous than the last. Ning Chen laughed out loud and swung his sword to block the attacks of the 3 people in front of him. His expression was incomparably savage as he said, "Good timing." As soon as he finished speaking, Ning Chen's rank 7 aura was fully unleashed. His sword momentum was unreasonably large. The 9 of them were soon no match for him. One by one they were sent flying covered in blood. When she saw this, Qin Wushuang gave a cold sneer. Moving her lotus steps, she instantly arrived before Ning Chen and pressed her palm towards the latter's chest. At this critical moment, Ning Chen sent out his finger. The finger and palm collided with each other. With a bang, a violent wind emerged around the 2 of them. It was a battle of foundation and strength. The corner of their mouths were dyed red. Instantly, the frightening power shattered the stone floor beneath them and sent gravel flying everywhere. The evenly matched battle had shocked both of them. Ning Chen's eyes became cold. Indeed, the love mansion was full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. However, even if it was a dragon's lair or a tiger's den, he would still charge in. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang was also shocked. Yet, she did not dare to withdraw her power. Ning Chen gave a cold sneer and unleashed his power without giving in. The brilliant battle had attracted the attention of a few important figures in the love mansion. Immediately, a powerful palm appeared and separated the 2 of them. When the dust and sand had dispersed, a middle-aged man appeared. He looked at Ning Chen and said calmly, "You want to marry Wushuang? I wanted to before, but now I don't want to anymore. In the future, it'll depend on my mood," said Ning Chen arrogantly. The middle-aged man frowned. "It doesn't matter if you want to or not. If you want to enter the love mansion, you must first pass the love mansion's test and abide by the love mansion's rules." "What test? What rules?" asked Ning Chen suspiciously. "The test is very simple. Defeat a azure-robed disciple. As for the rules, we'll talk about them after you pass the test," explained the middle-aged man. He then turned and walked towards the back of the mansion. "That's exactly what I was looking for." Ning Chen raised his broken iron sword and followed. After the 2 of them left, Qin Wushuang suddenly staggered and vomited a mouthful of blood. She had actually lost the previous battle by half a point. "Miss," the steward immediately went forward with a concerned expression. "It's nothing." Qin Wushuang waved her hand. But a trace of dread flashed through her eyes. Just now, she had truly underestimated this young man called by Yutong. She had already taken half a step into the 8th grade martial path for a long time, but she did not expect to suffer a hidden loss at the hands of this person. There were not many people with such a foundation in the entire northern Meng. Ning Chen followed the middle-aged man into the back of the love mansion. He immediately saw 4 blue-robed old men. Each of their auras was more terrifying than the other. The weakest was at the 9th grade realm. "I've entered a den of thieves," muttered Ning Chen in his heart. His face subconsciously revealed a brilliant smile. However, he had forgotten that he was now an arrogant fool. He had also forgotten that his face was extremely ugly. As a result, this smile became somewhat terrifying. The 4 love mansion's elders could not help but feel a burst of irritation. How could there be such an ugly person in this world? Which one of you wants to go first? Or all of you together? Ning Chen pointed with his iron sword. Qin Wushuang walked in. The first thing she saw was the former's savage appearance. This time she did not say anything. Instead, she walked to the side of one of the blue-robed old men and whispered a sentence. "First elder, keep him." First elder was startled. He frowned and asked why. With his cultivation, he could naturally sense that the young man in front of him was only at the 7th grade realm. Although he was already outstanding among the younger generation, it was not to the extent that the love mansion would do anything to win him over. "I lost just now," said Qin Wushuang honestly. Hearing this, First Elder's eyes narrowed. He tried hard to digest the shock that this sentence brought to him. He knew better than anyone else Wuxuang's strength. She was already about to enter the 8th grade. Coupled with the Love Mansion's special cultivation method, she would not be at a disadvantage even if she faced a real 8th grade expert. He did not expect that she would lose to such an ugly person today. Old 7, go test him. First Elder's thoughts turned and he said, First Elder, this is not in accordance with the rules. The middle-aged man who brought Ningqian in frowned and interrupted. According to the Love Mansion's rules, if one wanted to enter the Love Mansion, one only needed to defeat a blue-robed disciple. If it was an elder, it would be too difficult. Ningqian was also a bit stunned. He was just saying, they really plan to send a 9th grade old man? Did they still have any shame? He only needs to be able to withstand 5 moves, First Elder said lightly. The middle-aged man frowned again, but did not continue to argue. The 4 elders were in charge of the guest elder assessment. He could not interfere too much. 7th elder was a slightly younger old man, but no matter how young he was still an old man. Ningqian was indignant. If he was also a 9th grade expert, he would definitely beat this guy until his mother could not recognize him. The problem was that he was only a 7th grade expert. A rank 9 old man bullying a rank 7 disabled person. How could they do such a thing? Who's afraid of who? Come on. Ningqian suddenly shouted, encouraging himself. Young man, please. 7th elder walked out and smiled. Old man, I won't be polite. As he spoke, Ningqian slapped his wheelchair and flew out. He stabbed his sword forward, starting the battle. Young man, you are always too impatient. As he spoke, 7th elder leaned to the side and reached out to grab Ningqian's right hand that was holding the sword. However, he felt the sword turn in the air and went straight for his throat. Clang! The sword and palm collided. 7th elder exerted force and the sword broke into pieces. The poor quality of the sword was clearly shown. 3 tails of silver were gone. Ningqian was reluctant, but before he could feel the pain, 7th elder waved his hand again. The broken pieces of the sword turned into rays of light and shot out mercilessly. Ningqian, who was still in the air, did not have time to dodge. The dark yellow vortex in his energy sea spun and the thick earth energy quietly took effect. His whole body suddenly fell, avoiding the rays of light. 7th elder frowned and reached out to grab Ningqian again. However, Ningqian slapped the ground hard and bent his body into a strange angle. He condensed his sword fingers and pointed at his heart meridian. Bang! The 7th elder raised his arm to block the attack. His cultivation of the 9th rank exploded, and he shook off the fatal blow. Ningqian flew back and returned to his wheelchair. He looked at the old man who was approaching him and smiled brightly. It's already been 5 moves. 7th elder stopped and snorted softly. He turned and returned to his seat. This guy's moves were so strange. There were no signs to be found. It was as if every move was thought out at the last moment. Everyone present could see some clues. This young man was indeed not simple. By Yutong, from today onwards, you are a guest of the Qing family. All the rules will be taught by Wuxuang herself, First Elder said, deciding the result of this battle. The Qing family needed such a strong person with potential. On the side, Qing Wuxuang did not have any objections. She wanted to accept this person, so naturally she would teach him. Come with me. Qing Wuxuang glanced at Ningqian and said indifferently, Little girl, don't be so arrogant. Sooner or later, this young master will teach you a lesson. Ningqian muttered, but intentionally or unintentionally, he didn't conceal it, allowing everyone present to hear him clearly. Qing Wuxuang's eyes flashed with coldness. She sneered, If you want me to be obedient, wait until after your surname is Qing. In the backyard of the Qing family, Ningqian was led into a small independent courtyard. Qing Wuxuang threw out a sentence and did not want to see this ugly face for even half a second. Tomorrow morning, go to the main hall and wait for me. Her departing figure was so cold that Ningqian did not care. He entered his room and closed the door. Soon after, he wearily closed his eyes. Pretending in front of others was always the most tiring thing. The Qing family's strength had shocked him. Just the Qing family alone had 4 elders above the 9th rank. Moreover, it seemed that this was not all of them. He had not expected the Qing family, which had always kept a low profile, to have such a deep foundation. Now what he wanted to do was even more troublesome. Chapter 88. What Ning Chan wanted to do. Only he knew in his heart. It was a very crazy and bold idea. Fan Lingyue didn't know that he was still alive, so he wanted to give her a big surprise. However, before that, he had to find a way to stab the Qing family in the back. He couldn't take it lying down. In this world he could be bullied, but he couldn't bully Zhang Sun. Qing Wushuang wasn't a simple woman. She could endure what ordinary people couldn't. He heard that the Qing family had a young master named Qing Wuyo, who hadn't appeared in the residence for a long time. He didn't know what kind of role the Qing family played in Fan Lingyue's hands, but if he could destroy it, it would cause some trouble for Fan Lingyue. Qing Wushuang wanted to recruit him now, so it was the best opportunity. The Qing family was deep, and it wasn't a secret that Qing Wushuang and Qing Wuyo didn't get along. This kind of thing wasn't rare in any big family. Moreover, since the appearance of the military advisor in Northern Meng royal court, the status of women rose sharply. If Qing Wushuang wanted to rise, she naturally had to step on Qing Wuyo. The current master of the Qing family was a very low-key person. Perhaps it was because of her personality, or perhaps it was because of the situation. In the era where Fan Lingyue was in power, it was destined that any big shot in Northern Meng would be overshadowed. This also caused the younger generation of the Qing family to be dazzling, completely overshadowing the previous generation. Other than Qing Wuyo and Qing Wushuang, there was also an extremely mysterious eldest daughter, Qing Wuhan, the direct descendant of the Qing family, 1 son and 2 daughters. In the past, the position of the next master would belong to Qing Wuyo, but it wasn't the case now. Not to mention Qing Wuhan, who had never shown herself. Qing Wushuang alone wouldn't sit by and watch the position of the master of the Qing family fall to someone else. A peaceful night passed. On the second day, Ning Chun arrived punctually at the main hall of the Qing family. Qing Wushuang also arrived quickly. Her face was still as cold as before, and one could even see a hint of disgust. Ning Chun expressed his understanding. Last night, when he smiled at the mirror, he also disgusted himself. There was a saying, "I'm ugly, but I'm gentle." Second Mississippi, Ning Chun decided to perform well, greeting her brilliantly, respectfully, and with a good attitude. Qing Wushuang frowned, not used to the former's change. If it wasn't for this face that disgusting, she would also like to have a good relationship with a young expert with potential. "Well, did you rest well last night?" Qing Wushuang nodded in acknowledgement, comforting herself that no matter how ugly the face was, she could get used to it. Unconsciously, her tone became slightly better. "Not bad. I just lack a little girl to accompany me." Ning Chun grinned. Qing Wushuang snorted coldly in her heart, but her tone remained calm as she said, "I will arrange for a maid to accompany you tonight." Hearing this, Ning Chun's heart skipped a beat, and he was a little dumbfounded. He knew that he had gone overboard with his acting. When he came to his senses, he hurriedly laughed and covered it up. "How could those vulgar rouge and powder enter the eyes of a fair-skinned gentleman like me? It would be better if second Miss personally accompanied me." Qing Wushuang's expression darkened again. This fellow hadn't even finished his sentence, and he had already reverted back to his disgusting self. "By Yutong, I don't want to hear these words a second time. All right, since you've entered the Qing family, you naturally have to abide by the Qing family's rules. Now, follow me to the law enforcement hall to do the first thing." After saying that, Qing Wushuang turned and walked out of the main hall, towards a side hall in the west. Ning Chun withdrew his smile and followed behind. After the scare just now, he was a lot more well-behaved along the way. The law enforcement hall was not far from the main hall. The person in charge was the middle-aged man from yesterday. After Qing Wushuang entered, she politely greeted him, and then officially led Ning Chun to the front. "Name?" In front of a stone pillar engraved with names, the middle-aged man asked. "By Yutong, Bai as in fair-skinned gentleman, Yu as in jade tree, Tang as in dignified appearance, Ning Chun replied seriously. Qing Wushuang endured her disgust and did not go up to kick him. The middle-aged man pointed through the stone pillar and engraved the 3 words by Yutong under the densely packed names. Then he turned to look at the young man in front of him and said calmly, "From today onwards, you are officially a guest of the Qing family. The Qing family doesn't care about your background. As long as you perform well, one day you will be bestowed with the surname Qing and enjoy all the resources of the Qing family. I hope you can cherish it." Hey! Ning Chun did not hesitate to disdain him in his heart, lying without even blushing. He dared to guarantee that there were many people secretly investigating his identity right now. However, how could it be so simple to miss a person who appeared out of nowhere? By the time they found out, he would have long run away. Even so, Ning Chun was still very serious. He nodded seriously and said, "In order to marry second miss as soon as possible, I will definitely work hard." The middle-aged man and Qing Wushuang felt helpless in their hearts. They did not know where this person's face and confidence came from. 2 days later, the Qing family will choose 3 people from the younger generation to participate in the martial feast in the imperial palace. Do you want to sign up? The middle-aged man thought for a while, and still made the announcement according to the rules. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. He secretly thought that it was finally time. This was the reason why he chose to become a guest of the Qing family. Ever since Fan Lingyue came to power, the Northern Ming Imperial Palace would hold such a martial feast every year. Every major aristocratic family had a quota, and the top 3 of the martial feast would even receive a special reward from the emperor. It was said that the young general by Fan Lingyue's side was the champion of the first martial feast. However, although the martial feast had been going on for 7 years, the rules were constantly changing. In the first 3 years, the participants had to be below 20 years old. In the middle 2 years, the age limit was relaxed to below 30 years old. In the following 2 years, the conditions were relaxed again to below 35 years old. This also caused the martial feast to become more and more unfair to the younger generation. However, Ning Chun was not surprised at all. In Fan Lingyue's eyes, there was no such thing as fairness. There was only the difference between usefulness and uselessness. 7 years ago, Fan Lingyue was still at the stage of stabilizing the court. He needed to cultivate a group of obedient and talented young people. In the middle 2 years, the court gradually stabilized. What he needed more were officials with steady minds and a desire to achieve great things. In the recent 2 years, Northern Ming had already entered a period of complete stability, gradually entering middle age. A group of people with mature minds would instead be more suitable candidates. The younger generation of the Qing family had already matured. Logically speaking, the 3 spots should not be given to outsiders. However, all signs indicated that Qing Wuhan and Qing Wuyo were not in Northern Ming's capital. This also caused at least 2 of the 3 spots of the Qing family to be empty. Therefore, when he heard the elder of the law enforcement hall ask him this question, Ning Chun could not help but smile. His smile was abnormally bright. Whether or not he could poke the Qing family's sore spot depended on this. This young master is registered. After saying this, Ning Chun turned to look at Qing Wushuang. He grinned and said, "Second miss, if I become the champion of the martial feast, will you consider marrying me?" This time Qing Wushuang did not refuse. Unexpectedly, she agreed. "Sure. Wushuang, don't mess around." The middle-aged man shouted with an unhappy expression. "Elder Fa Wushuang knows what to do." Qing Wushuang replied seriously. "Haha, straightforward." Ning Chun laughed loudly. He turned his wheelchair and walked out. In that instant, a coldness that could not be colder flashed through his smile. "Wushuang, you're messing around too much," the middle-aged man said with an unhappy expression. Qing Wushuang lightly shook her head. "Elder Fa, I've carefully considered what I said just now." Among the 32 candidates for this year's martial feast, the weakest is at least at the 6th rank. Most of them are at the 7th rank. Although there are few at the 8th rank, it's not like there aren't any. These years, the requirements for the martial feast have been relaxed again and again, making it harder and harder to become the champion. If he really has the strength to become the champion, even if I marry him, it wouldn't be a disgrace to me. The middle-aged man sighed and said helplessly, "You decide for yourself." This second miss of the Qing family was good at everything, but she was too calculative. She could even coldly use her own life's most important matter as a transaction. After going through the law enforcement hall, the two of them paid their respects to the three elders of the law enforcement hall, the law enforcement hall, and the law enforcement hall. Only then did the ceremony of entering the Qing family officially come to an end. When Ning Chan returned to his small courtyard, he was already exhausted. The rules of the Qing family were really troublesome. These were only the rules of the guest elders. If he was officially bestowed the surname Qing, who knew how many tests he would have to go through? However, for the remaining 2 days, Ning Chan was much more relaxed. Qing Wushuang came once to deliver 2 swords, one heavy and one light. She told him to choose one. Ning Chan naturally didn't hesitate to take both swords. This caused Qing Wushuang to frown again. How could this guy be so greedy? This young master has always used dual swords. Ning Chan didn't care what Qing Wushuang was thinking. He arrogantly and shamelessly replied. As it turned out, this was well-founded. 2 days later, in the Qing family selection, Ning Chan stubbornly used dual swords to fight for a spot. The elders of the Qing family weren't too surprised. This brat was a bit ugly, but his strength was unquestionable. No matter which family he was from in the capital, it wouldn't be difficult for him to obtain a spot. The slightly troublesome part was this brat's identity. According to him, he came from the Inai country in the south. However, they really didn't know when the Inai country had appeared in the world. The world was too big, and there were as many countries as there were hairs on an ox. Not being able to name them was even more common. They also had no way of determining whether it was real or fake. The spies they sent out had already gone south according to this brat's description. They couldn't really trust a person of unknown origin. If he wanted to become a member of the Qing family, he would have to go through many tests. Ning Chen's heart was clear about this. He was just practicing his drawing. As for whether or not he could find it, it had nothing to do with him. The imperial palace's martial feast was in 7 days. The entire Qing family attached great importance to it. They did their best to satisfy Ning Chan and the other 2 people's requests. Qing Wushuang didn't participate and gave her spot to someone else. Her cultivation method was special, and it wasn't convenient for her to reveal it at the martial feast. The Qing family was generous, so Ning Chan naturally wouldn't be polite. He took the opportunity to ask for a wheelchair. The one he was sitting on only cost a dozen or so taels of silver. It would probably break after a few fights. However, at this time bad news came, causing the atmosphere of the Qing family to immediately become heavy. A 9th-rank guest elder had come to the capital's Shao family. Chapter 89. In this world, 9th-rank martial artists were not as common as cabbages. Those under 35 years old were even rarer. Ning Chan used to think that 9th-rank martial artists were worthless. Everyone he met was a 9th-ranked martial artist, and each one was younger than the last. After thinking about it, he realized that it was not because there were too many geniuses, but because there were too many geniuses in the palace. Xia Kingdom, the #1 country in the world, naturally had no lack of experts and geniuses in its palace. In fact, after he left the palace, this situation immediately disappeared. In this world, there were more normal people than monsters. Northern Ming royal court was much weaker than Xia Kingdom. The number and level of experts were also much lower. The few 9th-ranked martial artists in the Qing clan were all over 50 years old, and this was the result of many years of hard work in recruiting martial artists. It was too difficult to produce a 9th-ranked martial artist in the younger generation. The Qing clan did not have one, nor did the other clans in the capital. Unexpectedly, one came from the most inconspicuous Shao clan. The Qing clan and Shao clan were not on good terms. In other words, among the top 10 clans in the capital, there was no one who was truly friendly. The arrival of a 9th-ranked martial artist in the Shao clan was not good news for the rest of the clans. Ning Chan was helpless. He despised the Qing clan's luck. They all relied on external help. Those who were lucky got a 9th-ranked martial artist, and those who were unlucky got him. The martial arts banquet was approaching. The atmosphere in the capital was getting heavier by the day. 7 days later, the vast and magnificent desert city finally welcomed the most important event of the year. The leader of the Qing clan was Elder Fa from the Law Enforcement Hall. Qing Wushuang also followed beside him. The other two from the Qing clan were the best among the disciples with different surnames. One of them was a 7th-ranked martial artist, and the other was an 8th-ranked martial artist. Ningchen still had that sloppy look on his face. He sat in his wheelchair and hummed a tune. His nostrils were up in the air, and he was extremely arrogant. Elder Fa was not a talkative person. As long as it was not too out of line, he would not care. Qing Wushuang even walked at the front of the group without looking back. The other two from the Qing clan had seen Ningchen's strength. They knew that this guy was not as stupid as he looked, so they did not want to provoke him. Therefore, in the whole group, Ningchen became the overlord. He was definitely the most eye-catching person. The palace of Northern Meng Royal Court was located in the center of the capital. Although it was not as magnificent and majestic as Xia Kingdom, it had its own unique style. The palaces rose and fell, creating a unique scene in the desert. The Qing family was neither the strongest nor the weakest of the 10 great families of the royal city, at least on the surface. The strongest family was, without a doubt, the royal Ming family. Rank second was the Yang family, a family that had a position in the military that could not be underestimated. Comparatively speaking, the Qing family was somewhat inconspicuous, and the degree of attention they received was really ordinary. However, this year seemed to be an exception, because there was an idiot in the mistress's family. The Qing family had always kept a low profile. Now, the ugly young man in the wheelchair was too eye-catching. His nose was up in the air, and he looked like he was number one in the world. It was hard for him not to be noticed. With regards to this kind of idiot, other than spitting in their hearts, everyone did not take it seriously. In the cultivation of martial arts, one's state of mind was as important as one's talent. If a person with such a bad personality wanted to succeed in martial arts, the sun would rise from the west. Of course, they didn't mean to insinuate the imperial preceptor. The imperial preceptor was a genius of his generation. How could ordinary people compare to him? In front of the palace, the people of the 10 great families were already in position. The Qing family was in the middle of the row on the right, and the leading family was the royal family, the Ming family. On the other side, the Yang family was at the front and the Xiao family was at the back. In front of the palace, the little emperor of Northern Meng sat quietly on the dragon throne. Although his face was young, he already had the faint majesty of an emperor. Ningchen raised his head and looked at the little emperor. His eyes narrowed slightly. Was this the son of the late emperor of Northern Meng that Fan Lingyue helped up? Just from their first meeting, he was more or less a little weak. Even though he tried his best to maintain the majesty of an emperor, he still felt that something was missing. He believed in Fan Lingyue just like he believed in himself. This little emperor would be a good emperor. Unfortunately, he was the emperor of Northern Meng. It was impossible for Great Xia and Northern Meng to have peace. As long as Northern Meng wanted to go down south, the first obstacle they would face was Great Xia. The grudge between the two dynasties was a territorial issue. Unless Northern Meng gave up on their ambition to go down south, the war would continue. Northern Meng having Fan Lingyue was the greatest misfortune of Great Xia. Let's begin. At this moment, the little emperor of Northern Meng announced the start of the martial feast. His voice was a little soft and had the crispness of a child's voice. He sounded like a girl. Other than the Yang family and the royal family, the Ming family, each of the 10 aristocratic families sent out 3 young experts. Including the 8 from the Yang and Ming families, there were a total of 32 people. The rules of the competition were very simple. They would draw lots and eliminate people one by one until the top 4 were decided. Then they would fight in pairs to decide the top 3. Ningchen was the first in the first round, and his opponent was a girl who was a 6th-grade martial artist. It could be said that he was the best of the best. The remaining 2 from the Qing family were not so lucky. An 8th-grade martial artist would meet a 7th-grade martial artist, and a 7th-grade martial artist would meet an 8th-grade martial artist. Ningchen's smile became even more brilliant. The scar on his face kept wriggling, making the surrounding people want to hide far away. The wheelchair squeaked on the stone floor. Ning Chan came to the center of the martial feast and stabbed his heavy sword into the ground. Looking at the girl opposite him, he laughed loudly and said, "Come, I will give you a handicap of my legs." Bah! Everyone couldn't help but spit in their hearts. This person's face was already unparalleled. If you have the ability, then don't give me a handicap. The girl opposite him clearly had a good temper and was even a bit nervous. She even stuttered a word of thanks. The scene was too strange. The 10 aristocratic families' people were a bit dizzy. The fight hadn't even started yet, but they already felt that there was nothing to see. The following fight was not as they had guessed. It was extremely boring. The thick-skinned man and the stuttering girl exchanged over 100 moves before the thick-skinned man won. "I'm so tired." Ning Chan put on an act, panting as he walked back. "Don't go easy on me in the next fight." Qing Wushuang indifferently said. "Oh, you even saw through that?" Ning Chan pretended to be surprised. "Don't think that other than you, everyone else is an idiot. Whether or not I went easy on you, everyone will know." Qing Wushuang coldly replied. I'm a person who has tender feelings for the fairer sex." Ning Chan shook his head and sighed. Qing Wushuang didn't say anything else. She felt uncomfortable talking to this guy. As long as he could win, he could fight however he wanted. Ning Chan gave this martial feast a disgusting start. After the last round of competition, everyone's appetite wasn't whetted again. The Qing family's 7th rank was eliminated without a doubt. The 8th rank advanced. Including Ning Chan, there were 2 in total. The results were neither good nor bad. In the second round, Ning Chan wasn't the first. He was placed in the middle. His opponent was a 7th rank. In the end, Ning Chan barely advanced. The Qing family's 8th rank also advanced. It was an easy fight. After all, most people were still 7th ranks. In the third round, Ning Chen's opponent was still a 7th rank. After fighting for a long time, he once again won by half a move. Immediately, the whole place was filled with boos and jeers. The Qing family's 8th rank met an 8th rank expert from the Imperial Ming family and was eliminated. The top 4 came out. The Ming family, the Yang family, and the Xiao family each had 1 person. 2 8th ranks, 1 9th rank, and finally the lucky thick-skinned man Ning Chan. When the rankings came out, Ning Chan used up his bullshit and directly faced the Xiao family's 9th rank. The Ming and Yang family's 8th rank experts were also tit for tat. No one showed weakness. Then, Ning Chan admitted defeat. The banquet was filled with boos, curses, and mockery. The young people were full of anger. They had been unhappy with this person for a long time. If they didn't vent their anger, they would suffocate to death. The Xiao family's 9th rank didn't win. He smoothly won a round. However, the top 4 rule was that everyone had to fight 3 rounds. The result was still unknown. The Ming and Yang family's 8th rank experts fought fiercely. Both of them were at the peak of rank 8 and could step into rank 9 at any time. Could be said that they were evenly matched. They didn't dare to hold back in every move. In the end, both of them were injured. The stronger Ming family's 8th rank expert won this difficult battle by a single move. The Yang family's 8th rank expert was crippled. In the last move, his Qi Ocean was injured. It was hard to say if the Ming family's 8th rank expert did it on purpose. However, the Yang family was the last to be eliminated without a doubt. Ning Chan was foolishly guaranteed to be in the top 3. For a moment he couldn't react. The Yang family's 8th rank expert was crippled. Ning Chen's battle was empty. The other battle was between the Ming family's 8th rank and the Xiao family's 9th rank. The battle between the 9th and 8th ranks didn't have much suspense. The Xiao family's 9th rank quickly won, and the Ming family's 8th rank lost. Then, Ning Chan admitted defeat again. This time, the surrounding people couldn't take it anymore. All kinds of curses rose and fell. Was this a competition? This was to disgust everyone. The few people from the Qing family also felt that they had lost face. The top 3 was too shameful. However, what kind of person was Ning Chan? He was so thick-skinned that he could withstand swords and sabers. No matter how strong you were, he wouldn't fight no matter how strong you were. The martial banquet's champion, 2nd place and 3rd place, come up to receive your title. At this moment, The eunuch beside the northern Meng young emperor spoke in a hoarse voice. Immediately the scene quieted down. Ningchen grinned. The moment he had been waiting for had finally arrived. The wheelchair creaked. Ningchen was on the left, the Xiao family's 9th rank was in the middle, and the Ming family's 8th rank was on the right. They climbed up the stairs and arrived in front of the emperor. I am Bai Yutong. I wonder if I can ask your majesty to bear witness to something? Ningchen looked at the young emperor and grinned. Speak, the young emperor said maturely. The Qing family's second young miss once promised that as long as I took the position of champion, she would agree to marry me. She even asked your majesty to bear witness. Ningchen's smile became more and more brilliant. The scars on his face also became more and more twisted. Ningchen didn't lower his voice, so everyone present heard these words. At the same time they were puzzled, they saw a black light flash by. The Xiao family's 9th rank, the Ming family's 8th rank. A sword without warning. Condensed with frost and dyed with blood. It drew the most beautiful light. It was so fast that no one saw it clearly, including the 2 people who had already fallen. Under the feet of the emperor, who dared to rashly perform martial arts. Now that the 2 of them are dead, will the champion be me? Ningchen was laughing. There was madness in his laughter. The black sword in his hand dripped with blood, shocking everyone present. Chapter 90. Qing Ning had said before that there were no absolutes below the Khanate stage. Even a 10-year-old child could kill a 9th rank powerhouse who was severely injured. Ningchen was not a 10-year-old child. The Xiao family's 9th rank and the Ming family's 8th rank were not severely injured. However, they still could not dodge this attack. Because the thought of dodging did not even cross their minds. For some reason they deserved to die. With the 2 dead, the little emperor was exposed in front of Ningchen. How far was a distance of 3 feet? A little more than 10 meters was very close to a martial artist. However, how could the emperor not have a powerhouse by his side? When Ningchen's sword moved, a figure appeared beside the emperor. A 9th rank, another 9th rank, and a true powerhouse who far surpassed the Xiao family's 9th rank. A powerful palm came at him, and the wheelchair shattered with a bang. However, the original figure in the wheelchair was gone. Ningchen, who was crippled, could not dodge this attack. However, it did not mean that he could not dodge it with his legs intact. He had been in the wheelchair for many days just for this day. A 9th rank powerhouse was also human. Naturally, he would have a blind spot. With a blind spot, he would make a mistake in judgment. Ningchen took advantage of this mistake and avoided the palm. He approached the little emperor and grabbed the latter's shoulder. Your Majesty, please grant the marriage. Ningchen stood beside the little emperor and said seriously, How dare you? The little emperor frowned and shouted angrily, Your Majesty, please grant the marriage. Ningchen was unmoved and replied calmly. Below the stone steps, the 10 families finally came to their senses. They were all shocked. No one expected such a drastic change in such a short time. Using force in front of the palace to force the emperor to grant the marriage was a capital offense. 9 generations of the family would be executed. The people from the Qing family were shocked, especially Qing Wuxia. Her expression was extremely ugly. This person wanted to consign the Qing family to eternal damnation. As expected, an old official in front of the palace looked angry. He looked at the people from the Qing family and said sternly, Let him go. Qing Wuxia walked forward and said gloomily, Bai Yutong, I agree to marry you. Let go of the emperor. The rank 9 in front of the palace also tensed up. Once Ningchen let go of the little emperor, he would immediately kill him. If I believed you, then I would have lived 17 years in vain. Little emperor, come with me. As soon as he finished speaking, Ningchen grabbed the little emperor and walked step by step towards the palace. When he passed by the middle of the martial feast, he stopped for a moment and said calmly, Qing Wuxia, go and prepare a horse. My patience is limited. I hope you can hurry up. Hearing this, Qing Wuxia frowned, unable to conceal the fury in her heart. Just as she was about to flare up, she was stopped by a voice. Do as he says. the old official in front of the palace said angrily. Qing Wushuang snorted coldly and left quickly. Ning Chan grabbed the little emperor and walked out of the palace step by step. A large group of people followed behind him. They did not dare to get too close, nor did they dare to stay too far away. The little emperor was very stubborn. He didn't beg for mercy at all. Ning Chan admired him in his heart. This little guy was very good. It seemed like that woman Fan Lingyue had groomed an incredible successor for the Northern Ming royal court. Talent, knowledge, the way of ruling a country, anything could be learned. However, the bearing of the ruler of a country could not be lost. Otherwise, if even the emperor begged for mercy, what would happen to the subjects of the entire Northern Ming? After a large number of guards in the palace surrounded them, they had no choice but to make way. They watched Ning Chan walk out of the palace with the little emperor. Behind them, the imperial 9th grade followed step by step, waiting for an opportunity to save the emperor. However, Ning Chan had endured for so long. How could he make any mistakes at this time? Holding the little emperor in his left hand and the ink sword in his right hand, he never relaxed for a moment. At this distance, no one could save the little emperor except for Xiantian experts. He was a 7th grade. Perhaps he could not defeat the 9th grade, but it did not mean that he had no power to fight back. Before the 9th grade made a move, he had enough confidence to drag the little emperor down with him. Everyone present understood this point. Therefore, no one dared to make a move easily. No one dared to bear this great crime that would implicate 9 generations of their family. In front of the palace, Qing Wushuang led a horse over. Looking at Ning Chan, she asked with hatred, "Who exactly are you?" "Country of An White Jade Hall," Ning Chan replied with a smile. Qing Wushuang was so angry that her chest felt stuffy. Even at this time, this guy still refused to give himself away. Next, a strange scene appeared in front of the people of Northern Ming's capital. An ugly man with a ferocious face led their little emperor and walked in front. Behind him, a woman led a horse and followed closely behind. Behind them, the civil and military officials, as well as the people of the 10 great clans, followed closely behind. Everyone's expression was extremely ugly, as if they had eaten a fly. Northern Ming's capital was not small. Ning Chan led a large group of people and walked for a total of 8 hours. They walked from morning to sunset before they finally left the city. The little emperor's face had already turned pale. A journey of 8 hours was unbearable for a 7-year-old child. But the little emperor still gritted his teeth and persevered. Ning Chan admired this little guy more and more. Threads of true qi flowed through his arm and into the little emperor's body, silently helping him to relieve his fatigue. Night fell and a cold wind began to blow. The night in the desert was very beautiful. The entire sky was clean, and one could see the stars and the bright moon in the sky. The majestic group finally arrived outside the capital. "Ride your horse and wait for me at the Sand Pavilion 30 Li East." Ning Chan turned to look at Qing Wushuang and said seriously. Qing Wushuang's expression immediately changed. Every word of this sentence struck at her heart. He wanted her and the Qing family to die without a burial ground. "Do as he says." The old official in the court spoke again with a gloomy expression. Qing Wushuang had no choice but to mount her horse. With a light shout, she rode east. Seeing Qing Wushuang disappear without a trace, Ning Chan grinned at the people behind him. Then, he did something that no one had expected. Ning Chan ran, carrying the little emperor as he ran for his life. While everyone was stunned, only a shadow was left in front of them. If a 7th-rank martial artist ran for his life without a care for anything, he would be faster than a warhorse. The 9th-rank consecrator in front of the palace was the first to react. He stamped his foot and immediately followed. Then the elders and young experts of the 10 great clans also came to their senses and chased with all their strength. Ning Chan felt helpless. He had no choice but to run. Staying here was just courting death. As for a plan, there was no plan. This was Northern Ming's territory, and the senior was not here. Who knew what to do? He was so nervous that he broke out in a cold sweat when he was able to kidnap the little emperor. The little emperor kept struggling, and Ning Chan slapped the little guy's butt. He liked people who were not violent and did not cooperate. The little emperor bit his lips and tears welled up in his eyes, but he would rather die than cry. His stubborn appearance coupled with his delicate little face made him look like a child who was at odds with his parents. Ningchen led a large group of people and ran for his life. He did not care about the direction. As he ran, he did not even know where he had run to. Suddenly, two shocking sword chi soared into the sky and collided with a loud bang. The surrounding heaven and earth could not bear the huge force and shook violently. In an instant, the world shook and a sandstorm surged. Fuck! Seeing a huge wave of sand come crashing down, Ningchen only had time to curse before he was buried by the sand. The consecrators in front of the palace and the young and old of the 10 great clans were not any better. They were smashed into the yellow sand by this terrifying wave. In the next moment, a dark yellow light flashed and Ningchen carried the little emperor out of the sand. He did not say anything and ran away. Fortunately, he had the dust scroll and the power of thick earth in his body, which played a big role at the crucial moment. After 10 breaths of time, the consecrators in front of the palace came out. They raised their heads to look for Ningchen and the little emperor, but they could no longer see their shadows. The elders and young experts of the 10 great clans also came out of the sand one after another. They were all confused and did not know what was going on. After a while, they came to their senses and their hearts sank. The emperor was lost. He was kidnapped by a 7th-rank young man. This was a great humiliation for the Northern Ming imperial court. Everyone's expression became very ugly. They knew that this time the capital would most likely face a huge purge. Send someone to inform the military advisor of today's matter. In addition, lock up the entire Qing family in the sand dungeon. Kill anyone who resists. The consecrators in front of the palace said coldly. Yes. An elder and 3 young experts of the Ming family respectfully accepted the order. They immediately went forward and restrained Elder Fa and the 2 young men of the Qing family. The rest of the 8 great clans did not dare to make a sound. At this time, whoever asked for mercy would be courting death. Moreover, they could not plead for mercy. The 3 of them did not dare to resist and allowed the experts of the Ming family to seal their qi seas. The only result of resistance was death. Now, their last hope was that His Majesty could be found as soon as possible. On the other side, Ningchen ran for another 2 hours. Seeing that no one was following him, he finally let out a sigh of relief. He threw the little emperor down and lay down, panting heavily. The sand was very soft. Even so, the little emperor's mouth was puckered from the pain. After resting for a while, Ningchen sat up and looked at the little emperor beside him. He curiously asked, "What is your name?" The little emperor turned his head. His expression was angry and he refused to answer. When Ningchen saw this, he was immediately unhappy. Did he have any awareness of being a hostage? Was he really not going to cooperate without violence? Little guy, it's just the 2 of us now. If I'm not happy and leave you here, I guarantee that when your officials find you, you'll be left with only bones. After saying this, Ningchen patted his butt and stood up. He really had the intention to leave. My name is Ming Yu. The little emperor could not bear it and replied awkwardly. His voice was soft and crisp. It was very pleasant to hear. No matter how strong a child was, he was still afraid of being left alone in this endless desert. Ningchen frowned. He felt that something was wrong. A child would not lie. It was just that the name Ming Yu sounded very awkward. Today in front of the palace, when he heard the little emperor's voice, he felt that something was wrong. At that time, he thought that it was because the child had not changed his voice. Thinking of this, Ningchen went forward and grabbed the little emperor's arm. He injected his qi and his expression immediately changed. He could not help but curse again. Fuck! Chapter 91. A girl. Ningchen wasn't a doctor, so he wasn't good at checking the yin and yang qi in the meridians. However, he wasn't blind. This was clearly a girl's meridians. The little emperor panicked. She hurriedly withdrew her arm and took a few steps back. Her face was pale. Your girl? Ningchen asked seriously. No. The little emperor shook her head in a panic, but that crisp and soft voice made the already weak denial seem even more feeble. Ningchen sighed and didn't ask any more questions. The little emperor's panicked expression confirmed his judgment once again. Northern Meng's little emperor was actually a girl. What a pitiful and ridiculous thing. It turned out that the previous emperor of Northern Meng didn't leave behind any princes. No wonder Fan Lingyue killed all the eunuchs and maids in the palace as soon as he came to power. Fan Lingyue's guts were really big. He actually helped a little princess to the throne. Ning Chen's mind was in a mess. Logically speaking, he should use this secret to threaten Fan Lingyue, and even spread the news, causing chaos in Northern Meng's court. However, this was a child after all. Once the truth was exposed, the anger of the entire Northern Meng would be focused on this 7-year-old girl. It was obvious how terrible the consequences would be. A girl in power was still not accepted in this world, let alone a female emperor. There could only be one Fan Lingyue. This was also the limit of what Northern Meng's subjects could accept. Little Mingyu seemed to have thought of something. Her face was pale as she squatted on the ground and shivered. She no longer looked stubborn and looked extremely pitiful. Ningchen couldn't bear it. Even if his heart was as hard as steel, he couldn't do such a cruel thing. He was a human. No matter how cold-blooded and heartless he was, he still had a heart. If the little emperor had grown up, he would definitely spread the news without hesitation and cause Northern Meng to fall into chaos. However, the one in front of him was just a little girl who had just turned 7. Get up, I won't tell anyone. Ningchen walked forward and sighed softly. Hearing this, Mingyu raised her head. Her face was filled with shock, disbelief, and a trace of hope. A gentleman keeps his word. I said I won't tell anyone, so I definitely won't. Ningchen looked at Mingyu and said seriously. Really? Mingyu's beautiful eyes were filled with hope as she asked weakly. Really? Ningchen nodded. Of course, even if he didn't say anything, he wouldn't completely give up on this weakness of his. He still had to get something from Fan Lingyue. However, these were all the schemes between adults, and had nothing to do with the little emperor. Hearing Ningchen's promise, Mingyu stood up obediently. Her impression of the former improved a lot. She realized that the ugly man in front of her wasn't completely a bad person. If you send us back, we won't kill you. Mingyu hesitated for a moment before making what she thought was a huge concession. Ningchen slapped little Mingyu's head and said, Don't talk about me like that in front of me. I don't like it. Also, do you think I won't kill you just because you said so? Those officials of yours can't wait to eat me up. Mingyu cried out in pain. This emperor. Just as she opened her mouth, she saw that Ningchen's palm was about to land on her. She immediately changed her words. I am the emperor of the Northern Meng royal court. I don't want you to die. If anyone dares to oppose this emperor will kill him. Domineering. Ningchen gave him a thumbs up in his heart. This little emperor had a great style. We'll talk about this later. Let's get out of this desert first. Ningchen didn't want to continue this topic. Instead, he used the moonlight to look around. He suddenly felt dizzy. It was the same everywhere. How were they supposed to get out? Mingyu didn't dare to refute and looked around as well. Her dark eyes were filled with confusion. She also didn't know how to get out. Do you know which way to go? Ningchen asked. I don't know. Mingyu answered honestly. Ningchen was very unhappy and said with disdain, Emperor? You don't even know how to get to your own country. Mingyu was speechless. The Northern Ming royal court was so big. How could she know everything clearly? Forget it. Let's go this way. Ningchen randomly chose a direction, and then pulled Mingyu forward. However, after taking 2 steps, Ningchen felt that something was wrong. He looked at the little girl and asked, You can't walk anymore? I can walk. Mingyu bit her lips and said. Ningchen frowned. He squatted down and untied Mingyu's shoes. With one look, his expression couldn't help but darken. The little girl's white and tender feet already had several blisters. Some of the skin had already broken, revealing bright red flesh. It looked a bit miserable. Ningchen felt helpless. This little girl was too stubborn. She was already in this state, but she still refused to make a sound. Speaking of which, it was also his fault. They had walked for more than 8 hours today. Not to mention a little girl, even an adult wouldn't be able to take it. I'll carry you. Ningchen carefully put the shoes back on Mingyu's feet and said, I can walk by myself. Mingyu's face was slightly red, but she still stubbornly said, you can either carry me or hug me. Choose. Ningchen was angry and said angrily. Mingyu's expression changed again and again. In the end, she had no choice but to compromise. Carry me. Ningchen's expression became a bit better. This little girl was asking for a beating. She only agreed to cooperate after he was angry. Come up. Ningchen paused and glanced back at him. Mingyu slowly crawled up, her face turning even redder. In this world, the distance between men and women was far beyond imagination. Moreover, Mingyu was a member of the imperial family, so she knew even more. For example, a girl's feet couldn't be casually seen by a man. For example, it was taboo for a girl to be carried or hugged by a man. Previously, when they were running for their lives, they didn't have a choice and didn't think too much about it. However, the situation was different now. In the end, it didn't conform to etiquette. How could Ningchen know so many things? Previously, when he was in the palace, he was basically a big boss. Other than Zhang Sun and Qing Ning, he didn't care about anyone else. Just as Zhang Sun was about to teach him some rules, he had already run away. Moreover, she was just a little girl. How could she be so calculative? The night in the desert was a bit cold. Ningchen took off his clothes and put them on Mingyu. After all, she was still a little girl and her body was more delicate. Ningchen felt that this hostage kidnapping was not worth it. Not only did he risk his life, he also had to treat her like an ancestor. Mingyu laid on Ningchen's back. Feeling warm, she gradually became sleepy. However, at this time, Mingyu suddenly noticed that the scar on Ningchen's face had opened a little. She couldn't help but feel a bit strange. She reached out her small hand and gently pulled. Then the scar fell off with a patter. Ningchen slapped the small hand in front of his face and threatened, "Don't mess around. Be careful or I'll throw you down." Mingyu wasn't really afraid. She could also tell that Ningchen wasn't as bad as he looked. Moreover, once a woman's curiosity rose, nothing could stop her. Although Mingyu was just a little girl, she was still a woman. Mingyu's sleepiness was gone. She reached out her small hand and carefully tore off the scars on Ningchen's face one by one. Ningchen saw that scaring her didn't work, so he didn't bother with her and let her do whatever she wanted. After tearing off the scars, Mingyu looked at them again. She still felt a little uncomfortable. After thinking for a moment, she shifted her gaze to the beard in front of her. "Behave." Ningchen felt the little girl's gaze and helplessly reprimanded her. However, once you lose your dignity, it's hard to get it back. Mingyu was already sure that he wouldn't do anything to her. The fear in her heart faded. Mingyu's two small hands searched for a long time before she finally found the glued part of the beard. She carefully tore it off. Instantly, her beautiful big eyes curved into crescents with a smile. She was very cute. "You look better now." Mingyu looked at Ningchen's side profile and said in a soft and crisp voice, "You have good taste," Ningchen praised. The little girl really knew how to talk. "I'm a little thirsty," Mingyu said. Ningchen reached out his hand and a silver light lit up. Immediately, snowflakes fell. They were very small. This was the only snow in the desert. Mingyu put her two small hands on Ningchen's big hands. She held the falling snowflakes and slowly accumulated a small amount of water. "Are you thirsty?" Mingyu asked. "No," Ningchen replied. Mingyu took a small sip and then put her small hand next to Ningchen's mouth. She didn't say anything. Ningchen drank the rest of the water. It was cool and very comfortable. Mingyu wiped her two small hands on Ningchen's body. After drying them, she put her hands around his neck again. "Can you walk out tomorrow?" Mingyu asked softly. "Yes," Ningchen replied with certainty. Even if he couldn't, he had to. There was no food or water in the desert. He was still fine, but little Mingyu didn't have any martial arts foundation. She definitely couldn't handle it. Although he had rescued little Mingyu from the Beiming Imperial Palace, he didn't want her to be hurt. He could be cold-blooded and heartless to everyone in the world, but he couldn't be cruel to a little girl. Moreover, before he saw Fan Lingyue, he couldn't let anything happen to little Mingyu. A normal military advisor was already scary enough, let alone a crazy military advisor. After we get out, I'll order people to capture you. However, I won't kill you. Mingyu's eyes gradually darkened as she murmured softly. Up to you. Ningchen continued walking step by step and replied calmly. Little Mingyu finally stopped talking and fell asleep from exhaustion. Today, this little girl had been frightened too much. No matter how strong she was, she couldn't take it anymore. Ningchen gently supported her with his hands so that little Mingyu could sleep more comfortably. When he turned his head, he saw that the little girl was still wearing the crown that symbolized imperial power. He couldn't help but frown. He carefully took it off and casually threw it into the desert. In the next moment, little Mingyu's long hair fell down like a waterfall and hung down behind her back. The night wind blew and it fluttered gently. Occasionally, a few strands of hair would mischievously fall on Ningchen's face. It was numb and itchy. Under the moonlight above the desert, Ningchen quietly walked step by step. He didn't say another word. On his back, the little girl was sleeping soundly. In her dream, there was no fear or struggle. You're tuning into the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.